G'day, freedom lovers. How are we today? Boy, have we got a doozy for you today. It's been a long time coming, but the mayor, at least I voted for, is back. It's been a while. It's been a long time coming, and it's very good to be able to finally give him the voice. We've obviously had to lay low on these sort of things for a little while just due to the heat that was going on, but, you know, it's time to move again, it would seem. Much like the last couple of weeks, I kind of had look, I'll just do this. I'll just do that. I'm not really in the mood for chasing people at the moment. And as fate would have it, yesterday, I make contact with Troy, and here we are with a guest. It wasn't what I anticipated, but it's what the universe has decided shall happen today. Speaking of amazing things that have happened in the universe this week, I want to big shout out to Vincent and Mary who come and visited us this week and dropped us off a lovely present. Wasn't that great? You know, it's the supporters of this network are absolutely awesome. I can say when I was in the lame stream, nobody ever popped around to drop me off a bottle to say thanks for the great work you do. You know, so it just really says so much about the amazing community spirit here in Townsville. So as much as I was like, I really should stay sober for this one, I had to at least have one glass. For Vincent and for Mary, big sips. Thank you very much. Very gracious gift. Hey, Robin, how you going? So for those of you who've been watching for some time, you're probably familiar with Troy Thompson and what's transpired here in Townsville. It's been one hell of a roller coaster ride, and it started here on this podcast back in 2024 during his election campaign when we got him to come in, and there was a wonderful 2-hour presentation. The mainstream media, of course, decided to focus in on just a little tiny tinsy bit. You know, that's the only bit they wanted to focus on. I highly encourage everybody to go back and look at the whole 2 hours. You know, if you want to really get inside what's transpired here, I would suggest that the other, what have they used? Maybe a minute. You know, of that 2 hours, there's another hour and 59 minutes there that they didn't want to look at all. They certainly didn't want you to look at it, but it's still there. Maybe not on Facebook, because I think Facebook is only holding things for 30 days. They're no longer an archive of information. They're only interested in the here and now, much like the mainstream media. They forget the history unless it suits them. So there is a link in the description to the Rumble channel. If Rumble doesn't suit you and you'd like some other platform, well, you'd probably be able to figure it out for yourself by going back to that past period of, you know, over a year ago. If not, you can shoot me an email at NQ Freedom Network if you can't find it, at protonmail.com. If you can't find it, NQ Freedom Network at protonmail.com. Shoot me an email and be happy to share a link for you so you can see the whole story, because one of the tragic things that happens within the mainstream media is they love their tiny teensy little pieces, you know, and they want you to focus on that tiny teensy little piece. Yeah, I'm going to keep milking it. But what really amused me to no end out of all this was the fail of the year. I think we're going to have to change that to fail of the decade, perhaps, unless they create another monumental stuff up like they did last time. So just a little bit of history recap. I'd like to take you back to the moment where the mainstream media conjured up what I would call an amazing conspiracy theory, because I can't think of another way to really describe what they did. Wild speculation, you know, beyond measure, really. It's quite astounding what they've done, what they did, more to the point. And it started, give me a second. No, hang on. Sorry, I had it up and it's gone. Give me 1 second, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for that. I had everything else all sorted, and right here at the last minute, one component somehow got mixed. All right, open that to there. Haha. All right, got it. So we add this to stage. So it started with Cameron Bates, allegedly a journalist, at least he claims, from the Townsville Bulletin, wonderful Murdoch media, where apparently Troy Thompson, friend says, counselor likely mystery guest on conspiracy show. Conspiracy show. Wow. I like the fact that they use that term. It's very good because what they've actually done is create a conspiracy theory here. Now, anybody would like a copy of this, I'm more than happy to send you a copy. They go on, lengthy, wide-ranging and rambling interview again to try and dismiss the idea that we were having a wonderful discussion. It must have been really painful for them to watch, a whole four hours or whatnot. But apparently I stumbled at a 30-minute mark. Can you imagine these poor buggers having to sit through one of our podcasts, desperately trying to find something to turn against poor Troy, and I outed Blackboard's real identity. Well, that was actually wrong, Blackboard, because Tracy was actually there and I read her name instead. That's what actually transpired. But of course, in their amazing deductive reasoning, they've decided that Troy was Blackboard. It's an amazing thing here. They even got upset when I mentioned that the Townsville Bulletin was making a mountain out of bullshit molehill. I'll fill in the blanks for them, given there were no convictions recorded. So they're dragging up a specific issue here where Troy was allegedly got a DV charge laid against. There was no conviction. There's nothing. It's a big nothing burger. But they wrote an article about it as if that was it. Like, just so desperate to attack the man in any way, shape, or form. And of course, I've gone, well, this is ridiculous. Anybody with half a brain can see there's no charge, and anybody who's experienced the situation, as I said here, any bloke in the world will tell you these days that all you need to do is fart near a woman and you'll have a DV charge on you. You don't even have to try hard. It's truth. You could just be a man and identify as a woman, I guess, and, have that happen to you. Or like anything's possible these days, really, isn't it? So that's where it started. But did it end there? No. You see, because it snowballs. And this is where the real fun begins. I'm just going to show you what Channel 10 did. Now, for those of you who are probably not 100% aware, 3.5 minutes in media time is an eternity. You've really got to have something special and amazing. And old mate really thought he had something special and amazing to do a 3.5 minute expose on Troy Thompson being Blackboard. One of the funniest things I've ever seen. Actually, almost as funny as the phone call, which you'll see my response. And I still cannot believe he actually put this in the article, not once, but twice. Absolutely astounding. Absolutely astounding. So here, history lesson of what Channel 10 did with this wild, unfounded speculation.
There's been another bizarre twist involving Townsville's under siege mayor. There are claims tonight that Troy Thompson participated in a 4-hour interview using another name and another voice.
Its tagline is, "The truth will set you free." The North Queensland Freedom Network calls itself a real voice in the North, for the people and by the people. And on Friday night, it had a special guest for 4 hours.
And g'day to Blackboard, mate. How are you?
Hello, Mark. How are you this evening?
Keen to not see you again, but hear from you nonetheless. So.
Oh, very good, very good. Well, all the better, because I hope I've got a good voice.
But he may...
See, and like anybody with half a brain would have realized I've implied that Blackboard has been here before. Don't you think you should go back and actually check that? Apparently not. If you work for Channel 10, you just have to have a good theory.
But he may sound familiar. Despite the voice distortion, listeners believe the caller is Townsville Mayor Troy Thompson. In the following clip, we've calibrated the audio to try to remove the voice modulation.
Proof's in the puddings, right? All right. He said something. Words are just words, people, right?
Wow, that really sounded like Troy. And this is the comparison. This, again, it astounds me that they consider this evidence.
Paired with...
I apologise to all services as well as veterans and defence. And I think it's important to put that out there.
Perhaps a coincidence, but it's the same platform where he made this comment in February.
I spent 5 years in the military in Perth. So I was in Signals, in Swanbourne, or Karrakatta, Fremantle, and SAS Swanbourne.
Claims Mayor Thompson later walked back before Townsville City Council moved a motion of no confidence last week, pushing for his removal from office. He's been on mental health leave since and hasn't made any comments publicly since Thursday.
Sorry, I got on a huge rant there. Would you like to interject something there, Blackboard?
Well, Not really.
So we called Mark, also known as Barbecue Batty from the North Queensland Freedom Network. Do you know of a man named Blackboard?
I know a lot of things, dude. Just get to the point. What do you want?
We're trying to confirm if Blackboard, the guest on Friday's episode, was that Troy Thompson?
You guys are so bad at your jobs. Mate, you really need to go do your research. Best of luck to you, buddy.
He hung up.
Absolutely hilarious. I still cannot believe that they put that in as some form of evidence. I mean, as if the circumstantial evidence they had to begin with wasn't ridiculous enough. They go and destroy their own character by playing a clip of me laughing in the guy's face.
Late this afternoon, we also asked Mayor Thompson if he was Blackboard, but he didn't reply before deadline.
I don't know the man personally, right? Maybe Troy's not the man for the job.
Troy or not, the misleading mayor, who is now on sick leave, has support.
I have reached out to Troy. He knows where I am. He knows he can come on at any time.
Matthew Carr-Stunin for 10 News First.
So there you go. But of course, it didn't end there. I went on and, corrected them and told them how bad they were at their jobs. And I just have to play this clip again. I love it so much.
If Blackboard, the guest on Friday's episode, was that Troy Thompson?
You guys are so bad at your jobs. Mate, you really need to go do your research. Best of luck to you, buddy.
He hung up.
I'm never going to stop laughing at that. It's like I'm going to be on my deathbed laughing. Do you remember that time that bloody moron from Channel 10? Yeah, I can't help it. But after correcting him, and obviously I called the next podcast the Troy Thompson conspiracy theory, because that's exactly what it was. It was little more than a conspiracy theory based on some of the most ridiculous evidence I've ever seen. It's comparable to, when you see some like really toothless looking hillbilly dude, with a little airplane flying around in orange trying to convince you that the world's flat because the airplane flew upside down. That's the kind of level of competence that I seen within that particular article. But of course it didn't stop there. I could play the whole thing, but I'm just going to focus in on the little bit that I thought was very entertaining, and it's very relevant because no doubt the media are going to have another crack. They will. They can't help themselves. Without me, what would their life be? So this is a little segment from their response to me telling them that they've conjured up a conspiracy theory.
Plenty of support, including those from the fringe online platform called the North Queensland Freedom Network. Its podcast host has denied any suggestions that a special guest with his face and voice disguised under the name Blackboard was in fact Troy Thompson when we made this phone call last week. We're trying to confirm if Blackboard, the guest on Friday's episode, was that Troy Thompson?
You guys are so bad at your jobs.
And he did it again.
He hung up. Accusing 10 News First of peddling a conspiracy.
I couldn't remember his name. I don't think it's worth remembering, to be honest. This guy's a f***ing idiot.
But
yeah, because I didn't tell you peddled a conspiracy. It was a conspiracy theory, mate. Come on. This guy really is an intellectual void. It's kind of where information goes to die.
Podcast host Barbecue Batty knows a thing or two about conspiracy theories.
The whole idea of trust the science is about as stupid as you could get.
And claims Blackboard is an Indigenous truth teller.
Blackboard has been on this channel before.
But Troy Thompson...
So the important part here is he's attempted to make me look bad. But what he's really done is given me a wonderful opportunity to demonstrate to the public how they take a little piece of something and try to make you look bad. So in this instance, he's tried to say, I'm a conspiracy theorist because I've said trust the science is ridiculous. Now, listen to the whole piece in context, because it's very important to get context. When you take just a little snippet and mess with it, as this intellectual void clearly has, you get something completely different. Where'd that bit go? Not that bit. Have I loaded the same thing in twice? Oh, I did too. Sorry, guys. Give me 1 second. Let's bring that video up. Where is it? Oh, no, there it is.
There's been another bizarre twist in
You free failure.
Hang on. Remove that. Remove that. Remove that. Sorry, gotten a bit messy here. Too many bits. That's the bit I'm looking for. All right, we got it right this time. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. This is the piece.
Are we living in where we're told, nah, trust the experts? And the experts, time and time, have been proven to be wrong.
Well, it goes against the fundamental principles of science, as I was discussing on our Friday night podcast with the scientist, you know, where the whole idea of trust the science is about as stupid as you could get, you know. I mean, if we said, all right, cool, let's trust the science, for example, you know, whatever Isaac Newton come up with, that's the end of it. No more scientific research required. Newton got it sorted, you know. But it turns out, you know, bloody Einstein come along with some new things that challenge that idea, you know. But now people are coming along and challenge what Einstein said as well. And that's science, you know, challenging the idea and going, hey, let's move on, let's advance. That's science is supposed to be about that kind of advancement. If you're not allowed to challenge it, how are you supposed to advance as a society? Very different to the way they would paint the picture. Don't you agree? Very, very important stuff too. So this is why I've started this podcast this way. It's been a bit long, you know, but it's important to paint the picture of exactly the kind of people we've been dealing with here. But without further ado, let's bring in the elected mayor of Townsville, unfortunately currently suspended, Troy Thompson himself. How are you, buddy?
G'day, Mark. How are you?
Not too bad, man. I thoroughly enjoyed recounting that conspiracy theory. I'm very well entertained to answer that question, and very glad to have you on the show again.
No, it's great. It's good to be here. It's been a journey, that's for sure.
Oh yeah. So I guess the question on everyone's mind after that is, are you blackboard?
Look, if I said if I said no, they'd say I am. If I say yes, they'll make up something else. So there's, like you said, there's always snippets. No, I'm not. Never will be. I will say, to anything I say tonight is my comment, my view, and it's not that as mayor of Townsville. I'm not an elected official at this stage, I should say. So these are my own views and comments and my own opinions.
As a private citizen and a ratepayer yourself.
That's exactly right. Same as everybody else, but I never thought I was any better or worse than anybody else either. So it's never changed.
That's it. So, I mean, did you want to speak to what transpired the first time on the podcast, which they've run with in an astounding level? I mean, you've come out and you've apologized and said, look, you made the mistake, you got it wrong. You know, I think we're all capable of having a little memory lapse from time to time with, you know, how long we did this and how long we did that. I spoke to a doctor not long after the whole thing had happened, you know, and the doctor said to me, look, those kind of memory lapses happen all the time. You know, it's amazing how many times I'll have somebody come in and speak to them about, well, hey, look, you had this surgery happen, you know, very major surgery. How long ago was that? And the time frame they give is generally not accurate. And you'd think something like life-changing surgery or life-saving surgery might actually, you know, come with a pretty tight time frame and you would remember that. But as the doctor pointed out to me, it's very easy to make that mistake.
Yeah, look, it is. And to be fair, it was the first time that I'd had any length of time with any form of media. We made it very clear from the beginning that we didn't agree with the Bulletin and a lot of the mainstream media, and we weren't getting any traction with any of those because we weren't the people that were supposed to be elected. We weren't paying the big bucks. We certainly weren't going down that pathway. But, you know, we spent, 2-3 hours going through a lot of things. And I talk to people all the time about my current affair interview as well. And, you know, the snippet was 7 minutes were played. But what we learned from our first interview with yourself was record it and make it available to the general public so they can hear the whole context of what he said. And when people actually see that, and I've put that up on several occasions, they pretty much understand that, look, one, it was a long time ago, but at the end of the day, 30 minutes is 30 minutes, not 7. So listen to the whole story before you make your evaluation. What was interesting was a vote of no confidence on the Channel 7 one was that when they made that decision to do a vote of no confidence, they hadn't actually seen the 30 minutes. They'd seen a snippet. So they'd based it on what was, I guess, manipulated, and that was it. But and that's fine. But going back to our first interview, everything's new. You know, never been a counsellor, didn't have any media training.
Yeah.
And I think what people have seen from me is the transparency that is now coming out is demonstrating why I put a petition together to dismiss Townsville City Council.
Awesome. So I guess that's the main theme we've got here, you know, because we've seen one hell of a show. If that's one polite way of putting it, to the extent that the Townsville City Council have seemed to be ducking and weaving more often than anything. To me, it seems mainstream media are in defense of them, you know, compared to the full-on onslaught that they threw at you. You know, I mean, was there any time during your tenure, even leading up to it, that the mainstream media said anything nice?
Look, I don't think so. And it's funny, before the election, I had conversations with the now Premier and other members of the Parliament, and they couldn't believe the intensity, the amount of front pages, and the negativity, and to be standing. And look, I look at that journey now and think to myself, well, if you haven't got me then, you're not going to get me now. So yeah. You keep fighting, and you fight for what you believe in. I've always loved Townsville. I was born here. I went to school here. My family's here. And it's not going to change. My respect for Townsville and the people of Townsville doesn't change. I think the media just didn't want me there. That's what it came down to. And the proof was in the pudding. I have kept the clipping of when they were going to announce that, and the experts at Townsville Bulletin had predicted 9 of the 10 Team Jenny Hill members would get voted in. And I think it's fantastic because they got 4 and 2 of them didn't even go to a vote. So, you know, it really demonstrated to me how wrong media can be and how wrong they can get the polls. And I love that. I love that because, you know, I made a stance at that period of time when they started to attack me to not communicate. If they don't show me respect, then I will not show them respect. Let's play a fair game.
Yeah. And hence why I've had to create the North Queensland Freedom Network, having worked within, you know, the horrific state of mainstream media and now seeing, particularly in the last 4 to 5 years, the absolute garbage that they'll come out with, you know, and with such ferocity too, you know. It's hard to take anything they say seriously, especially when all of a sudden you find yourself you know, in their sights, and you just can't help but laugh at how pathetic it is. But the sad thing, I guess, is there's a lot of people out there that listen to those little sound bites and that manipulative language that they use to guide people into a specific train of thought, and, you know, are unfortunately swayed by such poor reporting.
And look, at the same time, when you look at the reports and you get mini clips, and people are busy these days, so they see that hook that the media throws out. You know, Troy Thompson did this or Batty did that, and that's what people grab onto because they've got 2 minutes to listen. They don't have the time to dive down into the detail. But when they see the detail, people are like, and look, one of the things that I'm very conscious of is when I have my pop-ups and people come and talk to me, what their view of me was built on those little snippets, the hooks, the clips, and when they sit down and talk to me, it's like, well, that's not what we were told. And that's what I think everybody and you would have it yourself in media, is exposed to. So unfortunately, there's always going to be people who are short on time, don't get the whole story, have made an opinion, read the paper all the time, and that's all they see. unfortunately, that's the narrative that gets driven.
Yeah, it is pretty sad. Very sad. So, I think people are starting to wake up to it, though. There's a lot more people. I mean, support for the network here is growing. There's hundreds of people already tuned in today to watch this interview live and throw their 2 cents in comment-wise. And, by all means, ask your questions, ladies and gentlemen. We'll take questions towards the end. We would just want to get to the point. But, in an effort to try and keep this down to a more digestible size, I guess we'll get straight to why we are here today. I think we've pretty much well addressed everything that's transpired and whatnot. What you've decided to move forward and you with a petition to have the Townsville City Council
dismissed.
What's the correct? Dismissed is the correct term, and perhaps put into administration.
Yeah, look, it's under section 123 and 124. The minister can ask the governor in council to dismiss the entire council. So that's basically putting off the councillors and the executive team, and that's what I'm asking for, and to free it up. And in my letter, to the Mark Laurie, who is the Clerk of Parliament for an e-petition, I asked that the council be investigated for at least the last decade, so we get some clarity, because I don't know how many times I get told and I hear, and I'm listening to meetings and I'm not there, but I'm well aware of, confidential information that others aren't, that people say, and councillors say, oh, we don't have money for that. And I've always, when I came into council, I said, well, why don't we? Where's the money gone? Where's it been spent? Where are we directing our funding? And since then, I've been able to investigate. Having the time off that I've had, I've gone through a lot of documentation and information, and had a lot of discussions with members, residents, ratepayers, and in particular, Townsville City Council employees who keep ringing me, keep emailing me, keep giving me information, whistleblowers. But they're scared. They don't want to say anything to people that they work for. So I guess I gather that, and we're now in a comfortable position to present that, and can clearly demonstrate that the 5 key principles of the Act have been breached, and we are willing to demonstrate that, and not just once, but the other part of it too is what's interesting about all of this and my suspension is that I'm suspended because I'm under investigation from the CCC. However, so is every other councillor, and so is a lot of the executive. So should they all be suspended as well, or is it just me? I mean, at the end of the day, I guess the assumption's been made is that it's in the public interest that I'm not there. But is it in public interest that I'm bringing up things that we need to discuss and need to be aware of? I've asked for confidentiality layers to be removed from day one. Let's not go behind closed doors. Let's open it up and hear everything. When you see a budget, you see a name at the top of the page and an amount, but you don't know until you drill down what all that goes to. It's a lot of things. So that's what's led me to the financial side, the culture, and there's a lot that goes back. This is decisions made well before I got in there. I might be accused of being dysfunctional and the council now dysfunctional, but that's because we've demonstrated what had gone on previously with the government. So the team Jenny Hill, and maybe back before then as well. You look, 10 to 15 years back, different government. And it's all got to be exposed. We've got to look at where the money's gone. Has it been misspent? Phil Thompson was very, very loud and proud in Parliament under parliamentary privilege and said, why did the Horton pipeline blow out? Things like that we've got to uncover those numbers. And people should know, because we're ratepayers who pay for that. We pay for those bureaucrats and councillors. And I think that's a fair reason to take it forward. So this petition, it's on change.org. It was registered for e-petitions, but it's got to go through the clerk of the court. It doesn't necessarily have to be sponsored. The clerk of the court can bring it forward. It has been put to the attention of the members here in Townsville, Hinchinbrook, Mundingburra, Thuringowa, but it's also under the microscope with some federal members and some senators as well. So this exposure will continue. And I think a lot of the times it's a case of, if we out of sight, out of mind, he's gone. And we should be asking the question. So as a citizen and a member of community, I'm now asking questions, and I'm getting so many texts and emails and people coming up and saying, stick to it. We're finally seeing something, because no one else is sticking their head up and answering questions. And that in itself is a breach of one of the principles. You've got to have social inclusion and community engagement. What I'm hearing from residents is they're emailing, they're ringing, they're not getting responses. The council even developed a policy to stop certain people communicating with them. Well, if that's not a breach of that part of the act, of a principle, communication, community engagement, I don't know what is.
I'm surprised that they even needed to do that, because Susie Batkovic was an expert on that long before they created that scenario within council, because I've sent her several emails, and the only time I get a response is if she's not in the office and there's an automated response to say I'm not here.
Yeah,
and that's an astounding achievement.
And look, that's common. I get asked all the time, should we have 10 councillors? What do they do? We don't hear from them. And, I go back to the very start of when we went in. At state and federal level, the office staff and support staff are picked and chosen by the incoming parties. Now, local government isn't a party per se, but we inherited the ex-Team Jenny Hill support staff. And if you're a new councillor, and I put it this way to people, if you're a new councillor and you go into the offices, they share offices with other councillors. They were paired with returning councillors. So it could lead to what might be coercive matters. How do we do this? Oh, well, you do it this way. This is the way we've always done it. So they're things that have got to be under consideration. Should they be sharing offices? I think councillors are big enough that they could have an office themselves. There's enough room in that building that they could. They could be having a private conversation with a resident, but the bloke in the next division is hearing it as well. So there's things that probably could be done better. And at the end of the day, the support staff are employed by the CEO. So they're not even, they support the councillors, but they're not chosen by the councillors. They're chosen by the CEO. And so interesting enough, in my final days, a member of the legal team was actually put in as an assistant to me for my correspondence by the CEO. Is that
a common thing to do?
Well, it hasn't been done previously, but it was shifted in my area, to respond. And as I've said many times before, and I've got a lot of information, people would email me, and 2 or 3 weeks later, they'd come up to me in the street and say, hey, mate, why didn't you come to this event? What's going on? And I'd say, I don't know what you're talking about. We sent you an email. No, you didn't. So I'd go and ask, and they'd say, oh, no, we actually gave that to somebody else. So people were emailing the mayor and it was being filtered out and going down. So I didn't see a lot of these emails that were coming through to me. So I questioned that, and then I actually gave a direction to the CEO in the early days, would have been May or June, that only my personal assistant and myself could see my emails. And when I got a copy of the people who had access to my emails in September, there was 7 people on it. So he neglected my direction. And that's in writing.
That is certainly going to explain why, when I wrote this notice, not only to you, but as you can see, to every one of them, yourself and 11 councillors received this on the 5th of October 2024, asking a very simple, straightforward question. Can you provide proof that the water is being fluoridated to specification to round it down? There it is. Read for yourself. Did you ever see this email?
I didn't see that email, no. But again, that goes to multiple layers of the council support staff. Right. And I have my views on who was controlling the stick, if you like. But at the end of the day, I didn't get a lot of the emails. People come up to me. So I was writing on the back of my business cards for Mayor to Troy.Thompson at Townsville, so that my personal internal email would get the emails, because they weren't filtering through to me. They were being, that's not important. The mayor doesn't need, or somebody else can do that. And look, it's all well and good that it's a fluoridization question, so they'll send it off to the general manager of water, but you CC the mayor in and you let them know at the time that the mayor should be involved. And they're the things that I found a lot of consistencies, and I've got that in writing. I've got a lot of those emails, and that's part of what we put up. So, right back to asking for an advisor, I went into the campaign and said, Jenny Hill doesn't need them anymore. She had 3, $600,000 was paid for all 3 of them. I wanted 1, but I had gone in on the premise that we shouldn't need advisors, but I'd never been in government. And I soon realised that, I do need an advisor, because I probably wouldn't be in the position I'm in now had I had my own advisor.
Yeah.
So there's things that you learn along the journey, but, it's a very sad state of affairs that every 5 minutes you get a code of conduct breach allegation or a reputational damage allegation, or things like that, and you scratch your head because you're telling the truth. Why should you be held accountable because you're telling the truth about something within council? Personal agendas aside, park the personal agendas. You talk about what is real in council, because that's what ratepayers want to hear. They want to hear, where's my money going to? Are the rates going to go up? Why can't somebody say yes in council? Because they're not answering that question. Can somebody please give me the complete costings of Lansdowne? It'll be no. Can somebody give me the complete costings of Horton Pipeline? No. Can somebody give me the complete costings of the Northern Rail Yards or the NQ Spark project over at the university? No. Why? I pay your wages and I pay the councillors' wages, but we're not allowed to know. We're not asking who the contractor is. We're asking how much it's costing.
Yeah.
And I think,
can you at least provide a redacted, bit of paper? Or, I have seen, I think it was Alan, asked some questions regarding things on Magnetic Island pertaining to the resort there.
Amaroo.
And, Amaroo, that's it. Thank you. And he got a heavily redacted piece of paper to the pieces of paper that may as well have not been given to him at all. It was it reminded me of a UFO document.
Well, isn't it interesting? I had a document that I emailed private and confidential to the CEO. The very next day, that document was published in the Townsville Bulletin. Now, how does that, without a request for information, without a request from the provider of the document? So in my mind, the CEO of the council is responsible. Now, if that went to somebody else and then to the bulletin, the CEO is still responsible because it went from me to him.
Exactly.
And that's the part that I find. So that's section, I think it's 4.2E of the Act and of principles, which is ethical behaviour of councils and council staff. Local government staff. Well, to me, that's not ethical if you're transferring a confidential document directly to the media so they can make a story and something of Troy Thompson again. Unbeknownst to the bulletin, I don't really care what they write. It really doesn't give a damn. They ask me a question, I'll say, well, what are you going to write this time? It doesn't worry me in the very least. But those people don't concern me. Neither does Today Tonight or any of those. It's not about that. It's you've got to get that information out. People want to dig into my past. They should be digging in what's really important, which is what's going on with the council. Why are we not maintaining our roads?
Why is sewage flowing down Nathan Street and into people's yards, or even spewing out of sewer pipes that they may have, or I'm not sure what the exact right terminology, there's a manhole cover and a release or whatever spewing out into people's yards. Like, this is basic infrastructure that is under council control, as I understand, and like to drive past a manhole cover that's spewing turds out every day to work was very, very disgusting. And I'm sitting there thinking, I pay stupid amounts of money for that.
Yeah, and look, the issues that are there is council put pipes in place, right? And we were a growing city, so we've grown and we've outgrown that system. So what you do is you immediately replace those. You make plans that you know that they've got this much life in them, that you've got this much growth. We know that. But every year those projects, because there's not enough funds, and it will be blamed on there's not enough ratepayer revenue, but there is. If we stop investing $100 million into Lansdowne or $100 million into Horton, or, we probably get $300 or $400 million back. Now, if we've got to park those projects, put the fences up, put the pressure on state and federal government and have them pay for it. Because if we all remember back a while ago when Jenny was the mayor, Phil Thompson offered $80 million for Horton Pipeline and it was knocked back.
Yeah.
$80 million was knocked back. $80 million will fix our sewage problem. That is a real consideration.
Are you able to tell us why she did that? Is there was there document, or is it a state of, oh, sorry, I can't say anything, it's private, confidential?
In my opinion, I believe that it was political. The state Labor government and Team Jenny Hill is ALP. Yeah. So there was an alignment. The federal government wasn't aligned with the state or local government.
That's disturbing to think that Jenny Hill and Labor would play ridiculous political games at the expense of us, the Townsville residents. So to me, that's negligence. Or is there perhaps another word for that?
Look, I don't think
it's almost criminal intent.
I don't think there should be a party member of any local government if they're elected as a council. Whether you might have views on ALP and you might vote that way, or you might vote LNP, or you might vote One Nation or Freedom or anything, but you're not a member. If you become a councillor, you have to take money from state and federal, and they're both different. The state government is LNP and the federal government's ALP. They're never going to be friends.
Yeah.
So if you're ALP, then you're offside with the state government because they're LNP. And this is what, people talk about me and dysfunction, but the simple factor is these layers should not exist at local government level. It's not about, it should never be about politics. To me, I would say, and my advice to the councillor is, and to ratepayers is, get on the phone and ring your councillors and tell them we don't want rate rises. And when they say we have to because we've got to be able to do these, we'll turn off the major projects and let the state government pay for them. Because that money, and they say we're paying interest on those loans, well, that's fine. Park them. We'll pay the interest because it's going to be a lot less than what you're putting into the project, and you can fix our sewage problem now. That would be my and then reinvest into your community orgs, your support. Yes, we've got to manage that better. And we've got to keep an eye on some of the organisations that get money and some that don't. But you don't cut off your community, because in a cost of living crisis, the last thing you want is charities going out with their hands out saying, can we have more? No, sorry, we don't have the funding. Well, you do have the funding. You do have the funding. If you don't put that money into large projects, let state and federal government pay for them. I said that from day one when I was elected.
I think it's something that I've seen quite a bit on social media, and to me, it's basic common sense. Effectively, when they turn to us, the people who are their bosses, fundamentally, and say, "Oh, sorry, we can't afford to do this. We need to charge you more." That's kind of like me going into work, turning to the boss and saying, "Sorry, I've horrifically mismanaged my funds. I can't pay my bills and I can't feed my family. You need to give me a pay rise."
Yeah, and look,
how's that going to go down in the real world?
Somebody had a comment today about the backlog of projects, and I have not been backwards in coming forward. There is a lot of projects, and how often do we hear, "Oh, we're going to do that road up. It's going to cost $10 million, and we'll do that next year," and then it gets parked for 4 years. And you always ask, well, when is that project going to come up? Well, we can't do it because we haven't got funding. We've got to wait for funding. And so you collect that over 16, 20 years, and all of a sudden, Townsville right now has 40-year backlog on those projects that were next year, and 40 years. So 2,000 major capital projects underfunded. How do you catch up on that? How are you not in the books? They're not on the books. They're not funded. There's no
Just
money
for those
going in.
who may not know, can you just give us a quick outline of what a capital project would be?
So you might have a sewer line that you've budgeted to upgrade. You don't have the funding to do that, so you apply to the state and federal. It hasn't come through. So what you do is you park that project until you've got some funding, right? And so it might not be the year of 25, 26, but it might be 26, 27. You get to 26, 27, you've got even less money because you've taken on major projects, and they're great projects. There's no doubt they're going to benefit Townsville in the long run, but are they projects that a municipal should be taking on, or should the municipal be fixing roads and footpaths and mowing lawns, collecting rubbish, or should they be investing in big projects that we can ill afford that the ratepayers have to pay for the next 20 to 40 years? That's a real concern to me. I would rather have a clean slate. And when I met with at the time, the shadow cabinet before the Christodoulou government was voted in 2 weeks before, I actually asked them for $1.5 billion because that's the projects we've got in front of us, but they haven't committed to it. So when a Townsville enterprise promotes, we've got $36 million worth of projects coming up, or $3.5 billion worth of projects, you've got to have the money. You can talk all you want about projects, but you've got to have the commitment, because what happens? Those projects then get parked. There's no money. But again, why are we taking on big projects when we can't fulfill the needs of a ratepayer? And that's my biggest concern. Somebody asked me today about the ring road and why is it so poorly maintained? And I saw on a councillor's page that it said that, it's not our road, it's state. Well, that's not an answer. There's an agreement between Townsville City Council and the state government. The state government pays Townsville City Council to maintain them. Townsville City Council might use a contractor. The state government say, look, we want the lawns mowed every 6 to 8 weeks. But we know in Townsville our grass grows pretty quickly. And then when you got floods, that turns into 12 weeks. So we try and mow things sooner, which is a cost at council. So we should be going back to state and saying, hey, listen, no, we've got to mow this every 3 weeks. Otherwise it gets out of control. We've got a rodent issue. We've got a snake issue. The long grass
and mosquitoes and
and so this argument about the wet weather and it's still too damp, well, it was like that, but before that you still hadn't mowed it. So you've got to get a regular maintenance schedule in place and maintain it and stay on top of it. And that's where we've reached out. Now, I spoke to somebody today who was an employee, and they keep saying things like, we've been told to do more for less. They've even asked me to be involved in negotiating salaries and assisting with them going forward, because the executive are saying you get this much, but it's not, it's not the industry standard amount, if you like. So, and that's what I'm being told by employees, and they're getting less staff, less spend, and it's not their fault. The workers on the ground are incredible. They work their guts out, but there's that middle management to executive who probably could do better. And that's where I believe in the budget we could save $20 million. Our employee salaries for 12 months is $171 million.
And is that including councillors, CEO, all that, or just the workforce?
That's the councillor, CEO. But, you take that pocket out, the 4 directors and the CEO, and then all the general managers, and then the line managers and supervisors, you've got 140 odd managers. I don't know why you need that many, but you've got a lot of management. So when you start looking at those larger numbers, you ask the questions, why do we need that? In a private company, you have a CEO and a chief operating officer. You have the finance person and the IT person. They're not directors. The operations manager runs the ship and reports it back up to the CEO. The CEO reports it to the board. In this instance, the council is the board. So, and I guess my point about rates and money and all the rest is, when this new rates comes along, and at the end of the day, there's only 10 councillors standing in the way of voting yes or no. So the council, the CEO and the executives and each department head will present to the councillors and say, this is what we need to do our job. The councillors have to stand up and say, well, look, this is all we've got, so that's all we're going to spend. You have to go back and find cuts elsewhere, not to community. Maybe we need to cut the major projects.
Mm.
You know, that's you've got to stand up and not just say, yes, that's what we'll do, because all that's going to do to the ratepayer is increase the rates over time. And it's really important that ratepayers understand that there is the people who are making decisions on the rates in workshops right now and talking about everything is the councillors. And that's why I encourage ratepayers and residents and to ring up their councillors and their divisional councillors until they're comfortable with an answer. Ask them questions. Where is it going? Why does it need to go up? Because if they pause those major projects, they've got hundreds of $1 million that can come back.
Mm. Well, you know, now I want to come back to that question of the fluoride scenario, because, you know, we were talking about accountability and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, I did get a response, you know, from yourself, and you've never seen the letter. So I'm a little bit disturbed. I mean, mind you, there's a whole bunch of words here, and none of which is the answer to my question. But
that's my signature. That is my signature. Yep.
Could that be considered forgery?
No, look, I would suggest it's probably been put under my nose. To give you an idea, I probably had 100 emails a day. Yeah. Lots of. I met with my correspondence writer in the morning and in the evening. So what she would do is she would get information and take it straight to a department, come back to me and say, this is what's been sent. I haven't read that document. I think you've shown me that one before, and I said I haven't read it, but that looks like my signature.
Yeah, it kind of actually looks like it's been photocopied, really.
Yeah, well, as I said,
it is a little pixelated, but, you know, when you see little bits removed, you know, being, you know, a bit of an art buff and, you know, into these sorts of things, that to me looks like it's been scanned in.
They do hold my signature on file.
Mm.
They hold all councillors' signatures on files and put on documents. I'm not saying whether it is or isn't, but I don't, and as I said from the very beginning, I don't get a lot of the emails that were pointed to me.
It's interesting because Christian was able to respond. He's seen it.
Yep.
He's seen the emails. Like I said, pretty much almost as soon as I sent it, he actually responded on a weekend.
Yep. And Christian's email is christian.price, not mayor@.
Mm.
So, you know, it's not going through 7 sets of hands.
Yeah.
And I can say how many times I would wake up in the morning and I'd see there's 85 emails. And then when I got into the office, got through my morning routines, spoke to the staff, I'd come back to my office and there was 16. And you'd go, what happened to them? You know, and that happened to me on a daily basis.
Very disturbing stuff. All right, well, moving along, obviously there's a lot of neglect going through the town. You know, the Strand is definitely hasn't been maintained. There's a lot of things over on Magnetic Island that haven't been maintained. As you pointed out, the road, I love the fact that there's a patch job on the highway that you mentioned on the ring road there, and the patch job is the worst part of the road.
I've driven that twice today, and I must say it is disgraceful. It's like they've just laid it straight over all of the holes. And look, the same can be said out the front of Marta. There was a massive big hole out the front there, and I hit it every morning, even though I knew it was there. I forgot when I got to that, and I'd avoid it, and it got filled up, and 2 days later it sunk. So when I hit it, it was a little bit smoother, but it still hurt. So I'd hate to think the smaller cars, the damage. I spoke to a good friend of mine who owns a tyre business, and he thanks Townsville City Council every day for the work. Because
I can tell you, I've got back issues. I am not thanking Townsville City Council every time I go down the west end of Bloody Ingham Road in a truck. You know, I mean, how am I supposed to get rehabilitated and back to work in a fully functional capacity when I'm getting smashed by horrific roads?
Yeah, and look, that's unfortunately, and I talk to people a lot every single day. I get so many emails still too, as Joe Public, Mr. Citizen, and they send me emails around. They're like, what's going on with here? And why can't we do this? And we've sent a snap, send, solve. We've sent an email to the councillor. We're not getting responses. And then you see, oh, we filled 700 potholes, but, there's a difference. To do it properly, you don't have to do it again and again.
Exactly. A stitching time saves 9. Right now, I think we're up to 21.
Yeah, and you don't just fill it up with bitumen and heat it up and compact it and hope that that's all and dandy. It's not. It's got to be done properly. And we just, look, to be quite honest, Townsville City Council does not have the money. And that's why I've asked the state government to step in. We need the funding and the support. There's a lot of layers to my dismissal of Townsville City Council. There's all of the 5 principles that make up the act. And then there's all the other rhetoric that goes with it. But at the end of the day, if you can't meet the basic principles of an act, then you've got to ask questions. And that's what I've asked of the minister. And then you've got all the evidence-based information around budgets, around culture. When you've got employees ringing you saying, look, if I don't give the permission to the HR department for them to talk directly to my doctor, then I'm being threatened to lose my job. And you ask, well, how's that possible? Why? That shouldn't happen. That's your private information. And that's the sort of stuff that I get every day. So that's all available to the minister and other people who are looking at it, because I think it's important that we've got to deal with the problem. We've got to hit the bottom of the barrel so we can come back up. And if we keep going in there and just putting Band-Aids on, eventually they fall off. We must fix the problem. And the problem is financial and cultural. And that's internal cultural.
So this is the actual change.org thing. The link is in the description for anybody who's looking. Perhaps you're on a platform like X that doesn't actually have a link in the description. I'm going to post it here in the comments if anybody would like to sign this, particularly, obviously we're asking for people in Townsville to do this. So even if you visit Townsville, I guess it's, or do business with Townsville in some way, shape or form, it's important, What I'm loving is this number just keeps increasing every time I look at it. We're up to 528 and it's only been out for about 24 hours now.
And that's the online version. That's not the hard copies that have gone out. I'm getting requests every day for hard copies. We put out today a call for people who want to help, they want to collect. I've got somebody tomorrow dropping 500 brochures into letterboxes. I'm printing 5,000 tomorrow to go out there. And we've got 5 weeks effectively to get it all together and get it back. Now, there's an e-petition with the clerk of the court. He may say, look, not at the moment. We don't believe that. So we'll go back with all these signatures. My aim is to get 10,000. I think we'll get there. We're 500 in just over 24 hours. And if we keep up this momentum, and look, the Bulletin actually wrote a half decent story today and put exactly what was put out there. I put the submission into Parliament and they put it out there, and people have jumped on the Bulletin and gone straight to my page. And that informs them about what the petition's about. It's not made up. That's the petition. That's what's been put forward. And that's what we're asking support on. If you believe Townsville City Council isn't representing the ratepayer, or is breaching any of those 5 items, which I can read to you in my letter that went out to them. So these are the 5 principles of local government: transparent and effective processes and decision-making in the public interest, sustainable development and management of assets and infrastructure, and delivery of effective services. So what we're effectively saying there is the sewer is being delivered and it's managed well. Is it? That's I guess the question. Then you've got democratic representation, social inclusion, meaningful community engagement. So why do you write a policy to cut community engagement with some people?
Exactly.
That's not effective community engagement or meaningful by any means. Then you've got good governance of local government and ethical legal behaviour of councillors. Well, I had a councillor, and it's with the CIB and the CCC, who tried to record me with a listening device and have somebody record me releasing confidential information. That's entrapment of a man. That's a serious case. But here's me. There's only allegations. I've never had a judicial process, never a conviction. And here I am. I'm suspended and put on the bench. Here I've got somebody who's trying to deliberately record me And then I've got other councillors requesting of the CEO to have copies of every email that I've ever sent or received from the executive, including the CEO. Why would you do that unless you're looking for something?
Yeah.
Now that comes under ethical. So ethical and legal behaviour of councillors, local government employees, and council advisors. Why would you do that? That's not ethical. So there's a lot of questions that got to be asked. So when the minister has asked me questions, I'm able to answer them like that because I can actually give real life examples, and I've got many. And now I've got employees coming forward and giving me that detail.
Some of the employees or perhaps other people within council in some way, shape or form expressing behavior that have been bullied in some way, shape or form?
Absolutely. There's a whistleblower program, and an internal culture review is from top down. So it's basically, this is our policy, follow it or see what happens. What I proposed and I put forward to council in the early days was, let's have an independent cultural review, an independent external whistleblower that can oversee everything, that is not attached to local government or LGAQ, that can report to the council and say, these are the things you've got to improve on, these are the apologies need to be given, and this is what needs to happen. Because at the moment, it's determined by internal middle management and executive management. And that's, I've got middle managers and a couple of executive managers who have come forward and said, I had this problem. And that's an issue. There's coercion, there's allegations of coercion, there's allegations of intimidation and bullying. There's all sorts of things. Now, the employees, I think there was a question there, are they protected by whistleblowers? They should be. There is a policy, but unfortunately that comes back to a group of individuals. If your problem is with, say, a person in HR, the person in HR is probably going to get that. And to me, that's a conflict of interest. That person's got to be removed from the situation. And that's the issue that I had when I sought advice as mayor. I couldn't rely on the advice of my legal team or the CEO, because if you look at the June matters, they came and gave me advice that I should walk out and that I should take leave.
Oh wow!
Because this is what the councillors are going to do. I didn't have an opportunity because I got knocked back for an advisor conveniently. I couldn't get an external advisor, so I wrote to the CEO and said, look, I need external legal advice. How do I get that? And they said, look, under the circumstances, you can talk to the legal team. Well, that's the person I've got the IR issue with. Why would I be talking to the person that I've got the conflict of interest with? So, there's those things that you need to have a detachment from those areas. You don't do it in outside business, so why should it happen here? That aside, at the end of the day, I've put up the dismissal of Townsville City Council. I'm not the dysfunctional mayor. I want things to happen and work. I didn't envisage any of this, and certainly didn't ask for defamation, and that'll all be followed up in time. But I didn't ask for that. What I've asked for is a fair go by the councillors and the executive, and we get on with work. I don't have to like them to work with them. We have a job to do. If I go to a civic occasion, I have so many people come up to me and say, stick with it, you're doing a great job. Finally, we're hearing about what's going on.
Yeah.
And to me, that means the world to me.
I actually heard that from other council staff that I just happened to come across and be having a yarn with. They didn't know who I was or, what connection I had. I don't know how you can miss it, considering my face was, plastered just as alongside yours in so many instances. But yeah, it was amazing how many people, who would confide, just like you can see the frustration in them, and I'd ask them also, what do you think of the debauchery of what's going on at the moment? The media making a big, fuss over all this. And they were like, this is good because at least the community can see what a shit show this place is now, and people are actually engaging and paying attention in what's happening in this council. You could just see the frustration in the workers.
And I 100% believe, and people say to me, he's doing that because he's bitter, but what they don't realize is I lose my job too. All the councillors and the staff lose my job. Why am I doing it? It's not to be spiteful and nasty. It's because we've got to fix the problem.
Well, there's the sales pitch, isn't it, for everybody who hates Troy Thompson? You want him gone, and you want him to stop collecting the $225,000 a year or whatever. Because the Townsville Bulletin had to mention that. You know, that was like the only thing that they really said that I thought, okay, yeah, cool. I'm seeing you trying to engage the people to get there. Oh, you know, they're raising our rates, sort of thing. And here he is using this money. He's not even at the job. You know, you can see that's why they mentioned that in the article. And it's like, well, if you want Troy gone, sign the petition, because they all go.
Yep. And look, the other thing is, I never wanted to be suspended. I'd be back in there tomorrow if I could. I want to represent. The fact that there are people within the council that don't want me there and work actively to prevent me from being in there, right through to discrimination, that's difficult to take. At the end of the day, I want to be in there. And to be very clear, there's not two mayor payments going on. The payroll hasn't changed. I get paid as the mayor, even though I'm suspended. And Anne-Marie Greenie, who's the acting mayor and deputy mayor, gets the deputy mayor's income. There's not two mayor incomes. She gets that income. Now, I would gladly step in tomorrow and do the job of mayor, but that decision's been taken out of my hands. That is the decision of the Queensland government. And there's a whole story around that will come out.
Well, you stepped aside voluntarily as well. I mean, there was an opportunity for you to continue to fight. Is that correct?
I would debate that. You know, a week before the suspension was in. This was if you can imagine, we just had the just cause notice. I'd put that back. No one wanted to remove me because they were scared of there's a lot of information to absorb. And then we'd had the vote, and David Christofouli had been elected as Premier. And at that time, David then had inherited me, and it was an issue. Do you know what I mean? It's not an individual issue. It's an issue because it's pulling down Townsville. So you've got to sort an issue out. And so amazingly, in that week before it had the first sitting of Parliament, I got a phone call from the Deputy Director, hey, want to come up and have a chat to you? And then he came up, I went in, met him, and he said, look, you've got two options. Next week, they're going to let you go or they're going to suspend you. And I said, what if I want to stay? Well, you know, that's the option. But, you know, just so you know, you could potentially take suspension with pay. And I said, but what if I don't want to go? Well, you don't have a choice. This is what we're going to do. To the point that I've still got the Queensland government advisor who was appointed to the council. I've got him. He wrote the letter of suspension to voluntarily give to me to give to the minister. So I didn't even write that. So if you want to talk about coercive measures, you could say, well, you either do it or we drop you. It's that simple.
Yeah.
And believe me, I went kicking and screaming, and I made it very clear that I refute any allegations or claims against me because there's been no judicial process. There's been no outcome.
Wouldn't a simple solution to this to fast track this, investigation and get it over and done with?
Yeah, well, it would be.
So is there something preventing them from doing that? I mean, does it really take that long? I mean, to me, I really look forward to them demonstrating that you've done this intentionally.
Well, that's it. Intention's the word, and interpretation is the word. And it's used very loosely and vaguely in legal circles. My solicitor down in Brisbane, Guest Lawyers, is eagerly looking at when and if something's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because, there's 6,000 documents that he's weaponized to use. It's all manner
in your defense, or that's been used against you?
Well, it's all the bullying, the intimidation. There's lots of things, lots of information. A lot of that's under legal professional privilege.
Right.
So I have a lawyer who is defending me. I've got a lawyer. If I get an OAI complaint, Office of Internal Assessor, he defends me. Because a lot of it is, you've done that's a code of conduct breach, but you're telling the truth. You're trying to. I don't want all this crap. This is what they throw at you to defer you from doing your job. My job was to lead the city, and hopefully have the council support you. But I've walked into a hostile council. I don't get my vote is irrelevant. There's 11 people voting. So if I put an opinion up, it gets knocked down.
Going right back to the beginning, do you feel they ever gave you a chance?
Look, in the initial stages, they did, because we're able to remove committees that were just taking up more time and more people. But it also, on the other side, empowered the executive more, because they then brought those decisions to us to make. But at the end of the day, the councillors vote. You know, Christian Price and Brady Ellis and all of them, the 10 other councillors were anti-parking meters. Kurt Rayburn, I should say, wasn't. Then all of a sudden, all the phones went hot and everybody backflipped. The same will be said for the barramundi fishing. You know, all of a sudden there's always nice stories, but they were against
and a big fake fish.
Yeah, and the evidence was there long ago. But look, I don't want to get, because this is the stuff, the nitpicking that the mainstream media picks up. At the end of the day, what we need to do is we need to get the Townsville City Council dismissed, get an independent auditor in and investigators in, and review the books over the last 10 years and find out where we've gone wrong in investing and why, as ratepayers, we've got to keep paying more because the money's being mismanaged elsewhere. Do you know what I mean? It's you don't invest in state and federal initiatives if you don't get state and federal funding. You know, and that's the problem. The blowout to Horton could get as high as 600-700 million. It started out as a quote of 195, and we knocked back 80 million.
And it's been alleged that it leaks.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's quite a few stories, and I put a post up, and I had workers on the pipeline saying that the joins actually don't join properly, and every 12 meters they leak. The pressure drops. So what concerns me is it gets to the pump station, we draw it back. How much are we losing of that water that we're paying for?
Is there an estimate on how much it leaks that would give us some sort of a roundabout figure of how much water is going to be wasted?
Well, look, it could be as high as 20%. Who knows? But that's a lot of water. You know, you're talking about kilometers and kilometers of pipe, and it leaks at every joint. And
we've had two major floods since the development of this pipeline. We've dumped twice, 3 times the capacity at least of the dam out into the ocean on 2 occasions. Would it be more economically viable to just increase the size of the dam so it can hold more water when we get those big rain events that I never bought a ticket to?
Yeah, look, I would probably go a step further and question. There's a lot of sensors on the back of the wall, and the back of the because our dam is an earth bund wall. It's not a concrete wall, so there's hydrostatic load that goes against that wall, and I would question, because there's some pipes in that wall, in that bund wall. So if one of those pipes are not replaced or fixed, or they break, we could have a very big problem. So
there's a lot of residential homes around that area that could wake up one day floating down the street.
But the question should be asked, should we now be going to state and federal government and saying, look, we need a proper wall put in there that's concrete or secant walls like they've got on marinas that holds that and is anchored back into the earth bund wall to protect it from collapse? That's the first thing that I would ask. The capacity, I think it's 280% that it can get to before we're in real trouble.
Yeah,
because
and we got close to that on that night of Noah scenario.
Yeah. But then we didn't release, and there's lots of factors and assumptions and allegations out there. But at the end of the day, I would say that that's probably the first step, is to look at the strength of that wall, because there's a lot of sensors being put out there to measure that. And, the moment we had that earthquake or whatever it was, that's where all the crews went first.
I like the fact you said, or whatever it was. That opens up so many doors.
but that's the thing. It at the end of the day, it's an earth bund wall. That is weak in itself. It's strong per se, but it is not a secant wall or a sea wall. Yeah, and that's the hydrostatic load that will go against it. So we've got to think about that in the future. But Townsville City Council can't afford that. What's interesting is all water sources, and there was a report from George Christensen around the critical infrastructure which the federal government is now looking at. So all water sources in all major towns are a critical infrastructure and potentially a terrorism issue, because if somebody poisons the water, we've got no water, right? So
from a defense point of view, I mean, you know, we are the most heavily garrisoned town. Shouldn't we have something a little bit more secure there? Like, I mean, as you said, it's a terrorist plot. If they wanted to do some damage here to the Australian Defence Force, you know.
But it is on the list of critical assets for the Australian government. So my question then is, and I think it was Senator Jared Rennick who brought it up, should that be something that is owned and run and maintained by the Australian government?
Yeah.
Because that's a major, I mean, that's more than 50% of our budget goes to that. So maybe that's something that,
and that's just in maintenance.
Yeah. So maybe that's,
I mean, it's about 50% of our rates is the water. You know, like when you look at your rates bill, you know, it's a sizable chunk. If it, you know, in the vicinity of 50% is to water.
So is you know, if it's a critical asset of Townsville and Australia, then and it's registered as a critical asset for the federal government, then the question should be asked is, do we have it? Don't we? I know that we get revenue off it, so maybe we maintain it under the governances of Australian government. There's lots of things that, you know, there should be a provision if it's a critical asset that the federal government actually put aside some funding to make sure that we maintain and look after and all of those things, so that we're not, because that's what ratepayers are paying for, right? So every time you get a water charge, you're paying for that maintenance and the water and the filtration and fluoride or whatever else is in the water. You're paying for all that.
Well, I still stand by our original statement that we made in that first interview that I see a big cost cutting there by getting rid of that fluoride, because I don't want it. I know there's a lot of other people who don't want it. I don't see why I should have to have it on the count of the fact that some people do want it. And as per, you know, that letter that, you know, I brought up, there's a lot more to it, but the Townsville City Council haven't been able to demonstrate that they are fluoridating it even in accordance to the legislation.
Yeah, and look, I get so many arguments to and from. I go to the dentist and they tell me it's got to be fluoride. You got to have fluoride and everything. And then I go to somebody else and I'll get a scientific report that says you don't have. So I've said to people all the time that, you know, maybe this is something that needs to go out to a referendum type decision by the people, because at the end of the day, there's more people
or not.
Well, there's more people in Queensland with not having fluoride in the water source than there is with fluoride in the water source. So there's that argument. And I'm not saying that good, bad or ugly, but I think it's not up to 10 councillors to say yes or no. I think you've got to go deeper than that. And I know that
I mean, even if I was the only person in Townsville who didn't want it, I'm still going to say, why should I have it? Because you do. Yeah, if you want it so much, you don't have it. It's the same as like if I want to go down to the supermarket and buy myself a multivitamin because I think it's good for me, then I'll go down and buy a multivitamin because I think it's good to me. I'm not going to go and put it in the fucking water supply so everybody else can have it because I think I'm doing the world a great favor. That's very selfish.
And look, I think, you know, part of that, again, one of the principles is community engagement, social inclusion. So that, you know, because certain people write about it all the time, they're being excluded. And now there's a policy to exclude them from communicating their view about that. That's a breach of a principle in the Act. So to me, there's a lot of vagueness and interpretation being used by some very clever individuals in the legal department that would suggest that, you know, is this vague? Is this interpretive? Would another lawyer interpret it differently? You've got to listen to the people. And has been my goal from day dot, is I get out and I talk to everybody. So many people still come up to me. 50% love you, 50% hate you. There's hate groups out there. There's people who replicate my account, and there's quite a few Troy Thompson accounts and this and that and all the rest. And I put it into comparison. When you've got 200, 300, 400 members, but 48 to 50,000 people voted for you, that's perspective, right? So you've got to look at that and say, well, you know what? There are people who look at me and they've been, you know, there's been defamation and all the rest, but at the end of the day, you did get voted in to represent the people, but you're employed by them by their rates. So you owe it to them to represent them in the best of the ability. So you don't always just take a recommendation from an officer of council because he says it's good. You go and listen to your community. And that's what I'm not seeing enough of.
Definitely. So there were some other issues you wanted to look at, like you were saying. Well, it's not just you, but people have implied that perhaps we have too many councillors. There's other areas that have a similar land mass, who are running on 6, maybe 8 councillors. Our current councillors are only required to work for 20 hours a week. Is that correct?
My impression was they're all full time. To be quite honest, I didn't read any rules to say they did or didn't. So I turned up at 6 a.m. and left at 6 p.m. every day. Yep. So that was me. But, I also look at, and I put polls out too to say, if you're a divisional councillor, should you spend 80% of your time in your division? And the rest of the 20% in the office. I saw it differently to others. And look, everybody interpret things differently. But, if you're paid a full-time income, then you put the full-time hours in, but it should be in that division. And all the councils are supported by support staff. So you can't get a hold of somebody for, say, a pothole, but then somebody else in council is handling it, but you're not being communicated to. So I guess the question that I get asked often is, do we need 10 councillors? Well, under the legislation, when you look at it, the minimum and maximums of councillors per division per population, we meet that, but we could squeeze it tighter and have, Phil Thompson looks after the Cedar Herbert. That's 3/4 of council. We've got 3 state members who look after 3 components. So then you go to 10. So to me, 1, 3, 6 is probably where we need to be. In Ipswich, they've got the same size and a larger population, but they've only got 6 divisions. So you ask the question there, and they've gone through the process that I'm recommending of dismissal of council. Clean the slate, start again, revisit. Do you need to spend that much on councillors, or do we need to strip them, make them busier, put some KPIs on them? They've got support staff so they can handle the heavy lifting, and the councillor can get out and represent and talk to people more often. That's ideally where we need to be.
Tracy has something to say if you want to unmute yourself there. Can't hear you, Trace. I think we might need tech support. So one of the NQ Freedom team want to get in there and give Tracy a bit of a hand. Of course, she's called Tracy because that was the allegedly the mistake we made back, revealing Troy Thompson as Blackboard.
Well, she might be Blackboard. It's,
there you go. She doesn't show her face. So maybe it is Blackboard. You never know.
It's funny. I listened to that when you played it before, and I'm like, I don't sound anything like that. But obviously, people saw it, and I'm thinking, even on my worst day, I don't think I sound like that at all. It's
And then there's the nut jobs at the Cooker page. They've really given themselves a proper name, Townsville Cooker Watch. They obviously look in the mirror a lot. Where they grab that picture that I made of the original One Nation cartoon, and you're standing in front of the whiteboard explaining how voting works, and that was their justification for why you were Blackboard as well. I'm like, oh my god. Flat earthers make more sense than these people. These far left loonies. Wow, they call us right wing conspiracy theorists, but truth, I don't think I'm right wing or left wing. I like to think I'm in the center myself. But these people, wow, it's a special kind of nuts.
Look, there's groups out there, and I quite often laugh. They spend, some of them are up at 2:00 in the morning writing reports and putting them and posting them up, and you're like, get a life. Is this all you do? Do you want to? It consumes them. And as I've said with me, I don't take any notice of it. I'm just like, who cares? Let's get on with life. Let's get on with making things right. And that's my whole purpose in this dismissal of Townsville City Council, is to make it right.
Yeah.
I'm throwing myself on the sword as well, and I'm asking the councillors to do that as well. I think she's jumping in and out. You there,
there's definitely. You there, Trace? No, we're still having technical issues. No, that's all right. So, I mean, obviously, the parking meters is a bit of an issue. You know, they seemed pretty committed to doing it. Has been implicated, or it's been implied that perhaps they actually already purchased these parking meters. I even heard rumors that, you know, that certain holes had already been dug, certain contracts had already been signed, perhaps, and certain people have been asked not to speak about it. Is there any truth to the fact that the money has already been spent on parking meters and they're just sitting there doing nothing?
We absolutely have the parking meters. They are stacked up, put somewhere. They are there.
Look out! We've got a Tracy there. We heard something.
Yeah,
but so we'll let you answer that question. Sorry.
Yeah, so there are parking meters, and originally when they got approved, when they got approved,
we can hear you guys. So just hold that mic for a second. Sorry.
Yeah, so when the parking meters got approved in council, before, you know, the community spoke up, the council went about putting the footings in for the parking meters and the posts. So in Pimlico particularly, and down Palmer Street, you saw a lot of nice steel shiny posts already cemented in, and the Dynabolt sticking out of the ground, ready for the parking meter to be put on. Then it got the kibosh, so they were all parked up and put in a shed. What has been happening, so then the decision was, there was 3 motions, and I put one up that said no parking meters and remove the parking in the city. But let's manage it by signing it and managing it better that way. So, you know, you don't have a camper van parking there for 16 hours when people are going there to work. Do you know what I mean? Move them on. Or, but that aside, in Pimlico, what was interesting, and I think this is the way that it's probably being pushed through, is the 3 motions were get rid of them altogether. Another one was let's pause it for a term, which is 4 years, and then we'll come back and reconsider it. And the third option, which was taken, was let's pause it for now, and then we'll revisit it should we need to in the future, sort of thing. You know, it's if it becomes a topic. So the way I read that was, you know, after whatever the term was, 3 months, you could actually put that in again for vote, and you could say, yeah, we're going to do it. There'll be backlash, so they didn't want the backlash. What I saw at Pimlico is I got a lot of phone calls. There was documents that went out to the Pimlico residents to say, this is what we're doing. We're going to put in signages for our parking. We're going to designate, you know, certain areas, the back streets, to certain people. You get a parking permit and all that. And it wasn't enough. But then you got to remember that everybody in Townsville goes to the Mater. So all of a sudden, these parks that were, you know, just parks are now 4 hours. So when people go into an MRI, and you know, particularly I look at my mum, when she goes to hospital, she's there for the day. They don't move real well when they've got a walking, you know, a walking device. So you that is unfair. That wasn't made public, but then all of a sudden there's 4-hour parking signs. There's still the premise that how is that being maintained and controlled and managed? A parking inspectors there, there were more put on. But are we going to get to a stage where, look, we can save money by not having parking personnel because we've got these meters? We'll just put the meters. And that's where I believe the progression, in my opinion, that the progression of the parking meters will evolve, suburb to suburb, area to area, until, you know, it's in place.
Yeah. Has there been any attempt to perhaps sell those parking meters or claim a refund in some way to recoup some costs for such a obviously bad decision? And again, I'd also wonder, was this decision perhaps made by the previous administration?
Look, I know that all the investigations and the research and everything was well and truly made, you know, before this local government was put in place. So there was always the thoughts and the premise of that's going to come along. But I think the whole thing was handled badly. It should have gone out to the public first for comment. It was very clear the public stance, and the decision was made. You know, public don't want it, so don't put it in. Let's find another way. But again, the argument was we need $6 million to maintain the Strand. Well, we just put $100 million into Lansdowne, and we're not going to see anything for quite a few years. So we're going to continue paying a debt that we're not going to see anything out of when we've got a need now. So let's reinvest the money that we're getting back into our city, back into the service that we need right now, and catch up. Let's get back on the front foot. And that's the back to basics approach that's got to happen. But this parking meter scenario had been researched and reported, and all well before I got in. So it was always on.
Money had already been invested.
Well, you've got to pay for surveys, and you've got
exactly.
It's the same with concert halls and things like that. They've all got to be paid for. So money's got to be put aside and spent by the council.
And I believe we have a concert hall that's been sitting there. One of the capital works projects that hasn't been done. It's been sitting there on the drawing board for quite some time.
Well, Tell put up the other day that all in all, the arena that they want to build is going to cost $360 million. Right, so that's a state and federal fund or a match fund, but Townsville can't even put 50% or 20% in. That we just don't have the money. But then the whole area is going to cost upwards of $1 billion because you're going to have a concert hall, an arena for sports, and all the other events, all of that. So when you look at the whole project, it's like, where do we get that money from when we can't do the 40 years of backlog now, and we're taking on new products?
Sorry, Trace, did you want to come in with what you were trying to say earlier?
Hi, Mark. Yeah, sorry, we had a problem. But what I did put my hand up to mention when you just asked Troy about how many hours the councillors can do or have to do. If you actually look on the website and under the Townsville Council website itself, stipulating what the job of the councillors are, it will say it's a minimum of 25 hours a week. So they can work anything above that, but as long as they're putting in 25 hours a week in that particular job, it's actually on their website and tells you that. So whether they work more than that, that's up to them. I mean, if they're doing another job and they fit it all that around and all in, that's fine. But to me, from what I could find, it says it's a minimum of 25 hours a week.
Do you have a link you can post in the private chat to us here?
Me?
I was just wondering if you found it. You said it seemed like you were looking. That's all where I was going.
No, this is from when I last year.
Radio.
Looked into it, and that's when I was doing all the reading and research, and that's when I read it.
Yeah, all right, cool. If you could dig that up there in the background and maybe post it in the private chat so we can confirm that, that'd be great. But I think it's a bit disheartening, I think, from a ratepayer point of view, to think that they only have to work 25 hours. I mean, I've definitely got to work a hell of a lot more than your standard 38 in order to survive, to pay for these people. And they're on, $170,000 a year is the wage plus benefits for a councillor, correct?
Mark, you know what's more disheartening, even above that, is that these councillors that are in there sitting and earning this money do not want to hear you.
Yes.
No matter how much you try and contact them. A lot of us don't have emails and whatever. We've literally got a ring. We leave messages. No one gets back. They then tell you, oh no, there's no one looking after those councillors, so you just leave us a message. We'll try and pass it on, but you don't get an answer. It's like these lots of councillors that are sitting in there right now do not want to hear from you, and they also don't want to answer you, and it's very very hard to actually get in contact with them. That's, I find, more disheartening than anything else. They don't want to hear you.
I think it's very disappointing that to hear. I know that when I went into office, I put up a diary every day on what I was doing so that people could see and people would ask me, what's that about? Who are you meeting? And I would clearly put that up, and I was actually asked to remove that. But I wanted full transparency on so that people could see.
Who asked you to remove that and why?
Well, it came from the council, the business side of it. So But
Right.
I wanted people to see what I was doing. But then that was, oh, they'll ask you questions about that, and that's confident. So there's things like that you've, and it's disappointing because I wanted people to see that I was working, that I was doing this. These are the things that I've got on my day to day. So when people say to me, what do you do? Oh, the mayor does nothing. You want to show them that you are working, that you are doing things. And it could be, look, I've got an afternoon spare, but that doesn't mean I'm not doing anything. I'm going to be going through a budget, going through this. It's about being very transparent with the community who are paying your salaries. And so that's Tracy, that's pretty new to me to hear that it's 25 hours because I was in there at dark and I left at dark. So I was first in and last out, and I watched councillors and staff come in and I watched them leave. So I was in my office every morning at 6 o'clock. And the only one who beat me in or was there at the same time has been removed as a director, which was sad to see because he worked very hard. So, there are people that it's not saying that people don't work and they're not doing 40 hours. I'm just saying that you've got to demonstrate that. And I think that's what the ratepayers are saying is, where is our money going? What are you doing? Can you demonstrate what you're actively doing? And it's not civic occasions and cutting cakes and going to, what's the best coffee in Townsville? It's all the other stuff.
Well, I see. I'll buy a packet of 2-minute noodles and it tells me what's in it. Not too much to ask of something that costs a little bit more than a packet of 2-minute noodles, don't you think?
Yeah.
So, CCTV, man, there are a hell of a lot of cameras. I don't know if anybody else is looking up. I know there's a wonderful movie called Don't Look Up, which kind of illustrates the point I'm trying to make here. How many people have gotten around Townsville and looked up to the extent that there are CCTV cameras in some of the lights? So there were some new lights installed down the road here, just down from the Park Palmetum. I came across the council workers and said, hey, what's going on here? What are you doing? They put in a new path and they'd wired up some new lights. And they said, these cameras have CCTV cameras in it. I'm like, what? Why does street lights along a random path need CCTV cameras? Like, I didn't think it was that much of a high traffic area. Every time I walk that path, me and whoever I'm with are the only people on that path. The amount of cameras we have driving around, like even along, I guess, the dark alley scenario, wonderful. Yeah, it's nice to know there's a CCTV camera there. Maybe that makes some people feel safe. Personally, I've never seen a CCTV camera, speed camera, or any other kind of camera get out and save a life. They keep trying to spin this "it saves lives" scenario. I've never seen it actually happen. No camera has ever performed CPR. No camera has ever removed a knife from a stab victim or a bullet from a shooting victim. I know I'm being, silly here, but at the same time, where's our buddy going with this ridiculous amount of CCTV cameras? Obviously, somebody's got to be maintaining it. We're talking about cameras, facilities, wiring, power. This has got to be costing us a hell of a lot of money. And I can't say that I've seen a result outside of the facetious ones that I just made.
And probably the question should be asked is, where in the budget is that allocation and what are we actually spending on it? That's probably the big scenario is, okay, yes, you've got 800, 1,000, 2,000 cameras. How much is that costing? Who's viewing it? Where are they viewing it? How many screens are there? That's the big question. I know in the disaster management rooms, that's where all the screens are. And Townsville City Council shares that footage with the police. So the police are in there. But, you've got people looking at, and it's a wall. You imagine a big wall in your lounge room, and it is completely covered by 100, 200 screens. And these people are just looking at that all day, and they've got to go out after an hour because it's doing their head in, and then somebody else comes in, and that's what they're doing. But, council, is that a state government thing? Is that a council thing? I don't know what the question is. Should it be there? Should it not be there? Should it be a police thing? But again, the community has a lot of questions about it. And I think, it's valid that those questions should be answered.
Do you have some kind of an idea of the costing what is this costing? I mean, Jenny Hill came out where you know, at one of the crime rallies, and I've got the footage here, and I've posted it on one of the crime rally stuff that I've done from last year. I think it might have been a bit earlier than that. Anyway, email me if you want a link to that video. But she openly stated that, you know, they can get state funding for putting the CCTV cameras up, but we, the ratepayer, had to pay for the people to monitor that. You know, yeah, I mean, I can't say that it's changed the crime rate in any way, shape, or form. If anything, if I were to put forth a statistical analysis on what I have, you know, I would look at how many cameras we've implemented over time and the crime rate, and it seems to be more cameras equals more crime.
Yeah, there was just a comment just then, Mark, that said 2K per camera.
2K. Would you consider that to be an accurate assessment?
That's installed and supplied. Now, I don't know if that is a private rate or a council rate. I know there's a lot in it, but I guess the ongoing, it's like everything. You install pipes in a road, you've got to maintain them and you've got to service them, and there's the follow-on effects of the service, and that's what our rates are paying for. But it'd be nice to get the clarity on what it is and exactly what we're paying for. And I think that's the Townsville residents and ratepayers are very smart. They're asking all the right questions. They're not getting the answers, and that's the frustration. You know, you everybody can look at a budget and see all these numbers and go, but you know, there's $30 million and it just says to one item. It's got an overview of an item, but what's that made up of? So that's, and people are smart enough to want to know more, because we do that with our day-to-day budgeting. So I think the accountability, that's the big one, is the accountability has to be there. When the budget comes out, it should tell us everything that goes into that item, and it doesn't.
Yeah, it seems to be, you know, the glossy flyer of look how good we are. You know, it's almost insulting to the intelligence when you see the communications. And again, you look at the glossy flyer and go, well, how much did this glossy flyer cost to tell me fuck all? You know, like this is, again, you taking my money to try and convince me that you're doing a good job. All I see is waste, especially when, you know, that glossy flyer did not impress me to the slightest. You know, we're seeing, what was it, Liam Mooney? You know, the guy who was accosted by a leaf blower. You know, poor victim of a leaf blower, Liam Mooney. You know, put on a play at the Civic Theatre. Apparently, he and his wife were running the business to put on this play. What burden has that had on the ratepayer for him to put on his little show, or is this something we've got a big question mark on?
Yeah, look, that was something that's been asked of me by a lot of people in that division, because during that period they weren't informed that the councillor was on leave, or whether he was being paid while, you know, doing that. He was actually in the play. So, you know, and were the people at the Civic Theatre being paid, or was the ratepayers paying for it? Was there a transaction? Where is the visibility of that? I think when you're involved in something like that, you've got to be. It's really important that you demonstrate to your electorate that, hey, look, I'm doing this. I'm going to take this time out. This is what it's going to cost, and this is what I'm paying council to rent the space. Do you know what I mean? And people are asking me that question. I'm like, well, I don't know. They're questions that you should be putting to the councillor and to Townsville City Council, because that's important. You know, that's to book out that facility when schools can't get into that facility. You know, at times you've got to say, well, what takes precedence, and what is the cost? So these questions should be asked, and that's why I'm saying to people with these rates, get on the phone and keep ringing your councillor, because no decision's going to go your way if you don't question the decisions and ask the right questions.
And just because you got ignored once, don't give up.
No. And look, now going into a rates release, and the budget will be determined on the 25th of June. Now's the time you want to be asking the questions, because they're in workshops.
Yep.
You want to be saying, look, I don't want a rates rise. I don't agree with a rates rise. Or, yeah, I want to pay an extra $1,000. Whatever you feel, you need to communicate that to the council, because those 10 councillors are the ones who approve the rates rise in the chamber.
On the topic of Liam, he seems to have himself on a lot of boards. His father was, previous mayor, also seems to have himself on a lot of boards and lucrative positions around town, such as NQ Spark, Northern Rail Yards. His father's, doing they're heavily involved in the hospital, which I must say I've been very dissatisfied with my services from the Townsville Hospital, and I'm certainly not the only one. Many people have, shown me some pretty horrible photos of what's come out of there. I mean, in my most, two main experiences that I've had with Townsville City, with the Townsville Hospital. One, I broke my own toe and basically was told to go home and see the GP the next day, because they couldn't keep up with the log. That long story short, I fixed my own bloody toe and I did a bloody good job of it. Thank you very much for asking. Second one, had to have a hernia sorted out. I was on the, in at 6 o'clock, on the table at 9, out the door by 12, to which my GP basically said to me that could almost be considered criminal, because anything could have happened to you, even as a result of the anesthetics or any of the other stuff. They doped me up and I woke up being wheeled out of the thing because they'd given me something to wake me up, rather than allow me to naturally wake up peacefully. It was just like, what the hell is going on here? It was quite a jolt. I was in a happy place having a conversation with God knows who or what, when all of a sudden, bang, I'm being wheeled down like something out of a horror movie. I was kind of felt a little bit like RoboCop, except, I still had all my limbs intact. But yeah, as soon as I was able to walk, I was out the door.
Yeah,
Personally,
and look,
the way I was treated in there and the way things were going, I was kind of glad to get out of what some might consider their care.
And look, Queensland Health is Queensland government, but it is an ex-mayor and he is on the board and he's the chair. And the question I guess has to be asked is, should these people be put into positions that there could be a perceived conflict of interest around the city? Should a ex-mayor be on this board, when they're working in a contract or getting remuneration from the Townsville City Council? My personal opinion is no. Detach away. They've got to be independent.
You have to wonder, are they utilising that position that they've had to line their own pockets in some ways, particularly in the case of Liam Mooney's. Also they're associated with Townsville Enterprise, on the board there as well.
Yeah, and look, we obviously have a service level agreement and we've given them all of our event management money to Townsville Enterprise too. So,
and he's now managing his own events.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
the same
it seems a bit dodgy to me.
Yeah, the same could be said. You've got Smart Precinct NQ. Now, they get funding from state government and federal government and Townsville City Council. And we give them a wonderful 900 square facility in the Walker Street building, and they get it for $1. So they pay $1 a year. It's on the leases that we put out. And they're questions that you ask. This is an organisation?
We've got to pay more rates. Awesome. Yeah.
So there are questions, but on that board, there's also, when you look at the board of Smart Precinct, and somebody sent me the document the other day, there's a Townsville Bulletin general manager on the board of a company that Townsville City Council puts funding into, and all those. So there's a lot of questions.
Wow, no conflict of interest there.
And that's my point. I think we've got to get back to stripping out. And they're the things that probably should go under the microscope, because if I go and rent 1,000 square meters in a building, I'm going to be paying upwards of 100,000 a year. So why? Yes, there's probably benefits coming down the line for businesses and all the rest, but you don't just continually hand it. I mean, it's something that Townsville City Council probably should be putting on the state government. Say, hey, give us the money for that, because that's a tangible asset that we can make an income off.
I attended one of these smart precinct things just out of curiosity, and I can't help but wonder what the hell was really going on. To me, it seemed to be very much pushing UN ideology to the fact that the charts that were coming up were coming straight out of the UN and their version of sustainability and all that. And I'm like, hang on, why are we looking at UN sustainability stuff on a local council sort of a level? This just, it stunk to high heaven. I personally walked out of there feeling less intelligent than I had walked in. You know, I didn't feel that anything that they were doing was of any worth at all, to be honest, other than placating perhaps UN ideologies and leftist ideologies. And it was very much put together like a primary school, maybe even, possibly, high school level sort of information seminar. I'm like, why am I here? Not exactly what I thought it was going to be.
And look, there's a lot of money and people in these that make up these organisations, and is it getting a return on investment for Townsville City Council by way of funding, income, or other social benefit? I can't answer that. I'm sure there'll be lots of presentations that say that there are, but there's also a lot of duplication of organisations. So I look at Townsville Enterprise, I look at Smart Precinct, I look at Chamber of Commerce, and they do very much the same part. But then you've got, as the elected mayor of the time, when I was on the North Queensland Region of Councils, Regional Organisation of Councils, that was 5 councillors who meet once a month. You would use advocacy and advertising and tourism under that body because you work together as a group, so you share the costs. But then we've got all these other bodies who are getting paid independently to do things. To me, we're sort of duplicating and triplicating what we probably could do under one banner. And they're the things that I believe. And people are of different opinion. They all have a unique part to their business, but it's not something that can't be universally modified in one or the other. But look, to me, that's why I believe we need to dismiss Townsville City Council. I think there's some really critical decisions being made financially that aren't to the benefit or in the public interest.
Most assuredly. So, you've taken this. Sorry, go ahead, Trace.
No, I was just going to say too, with the Townsville Enterprise, with the 5 or 6 lifetime members, and Tony Mooney being one of them, all of their membership, any function that they go to, all gets paid for them by the ratepayer. They don't pay anything. I mean, that seems to be a considerable, waste of money as far as I'm concerned. I don't understand why these lifetime members are getting everything paid for them, their functions and their lifetime membership, or their membership every time it comes up.
I can't answer it. I don't, if I go down to Brisbane, I pay for my partner, I pay for my food, I pay for everything. I've never, ever put a claim in for fuel. If I go somewhere, I pay for it myself. I drive my own car, all those things. So the extra and additional benefits, it's something that, again, should come under the scrutiny of an independent investigator. They're things that need to be discussed and put forward.
I mean, again, Townsville Bulletin's a platinum member of TEL, principal partner, Townsville Enterprise, the airport. There's a lot of money seems to be going into this, and I can't see that they do a great deal myself. I don't know, but perhaps it's not being reported properly. Personally, it's been my experience when I first got here to Townsville, working in the mainstream media. The reporters at the time basically said they couldn't see what the hell they were doing, and it seemed like a huge waste of money from their point of view. Of course, they'd never say that publicly, but that was my experience. I mean, I'm just guessing. I can't see that they really do anything, again, other than produce glossy flyers once every now and then.
Yeah. Oh, look, part of, I guess, the things that I look at is we've got to strip it right back. What are ratepayers getting? What's the bang for buck? What are they getting for their rates? do you as a ratepayer feel that your lawns and the gardens and the parks are maintained well, the roads are maintained, that the infrastructure is in good shape? And if you don't, then we're not meeting our obligations and it's not in the interest of the general public. That's the question we've got to get back to. There's lots of things that can be debated, from memberships, sponsorships, where the money goes. At the end of the day, we know what comes in for rate revenue, so it should be equal to what goes out. Any other additional business that we take on, we need to go to state and federal government and ask us for that finance, because otherwise we're going to keep putting the rates up for ratepayers, and you're going to be paying off debts for a long period of time. Because when we take a Queensland Treasury Commission's loan, generally speaking, it could be a 20-year loan. So you as a ratepayer are paying $100 million interest component over a 20-year pay down, and that's frightening.
Yeah, especially if we didn't get a say in it. Well, you know,
No.
why am I paying for a loan I never got a say in? You know, it's like especially since the councillors aren't even talking to us. Like, how are we supposed to get that public representation? And unless we are constantly vigilantly watching everything they do, they seem to think they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, and that's, you know, as you said, there's a big glossy budget and operational plan, and they're things that I think maybe there's got to be more consultation on the information that ratepayers want to see. As opposed to what is provided.
Well, we said that originally, you know, when you were running for mayor, that, you know, one of the things I said was, well, I want to see where all this money is going. You know, that was one of the main reasons I was happy to vote for you. And I believe it's one of the big reasons why a lot of other people voted for you, because we seem like, hey, we might actually get these answers. And I think it's very disturbing that, you know, with the assistance of the mainstream media and the old guard of the Townsville City Council, you were run out before you were even given a chance to provide us, the voter who voted for you, to do that, the opportunity to come forth with that information.
And there's a lot of implications to release that information, because you got to jump through a lot of hoops to give information that I believe should be readily available.
That's it. Well, that's what transparency is, isn't it? Or do I have a different dictionary to everybody else?
No, that's exactly what it is.
That's what I thought. Well, I think that kind of covers everything that, you know, I sort of really wanted to get to. Oh, actually, Sister City program. What the hell? Sister cities, like, I mean, again, this seems like another waste of money to me. Like, local council's supposed to be about us, the local people. Why are they, you know, as I understand it, they fly over to other cities around the world at our expense to go and see what they're doing and perhaps bring back some innovative ideas. Don't know if that's ever happened, but again, while we're in a budget crisis, wouldn't it be a good idea to scale back something to that of those kind of projects as well?
Well, look, there's a lot that has previously gone on between sister cities. I don't know that the information sharing has been realised, that anything's actually come to fruition out of it. From what I saw, I've met some of the sister cities, and one of the young chaps from Korea had actually won the running festival, and he was from the sister city. So I think we assisted them in, and don't quote me on it, but I believe we assisted in accommodation and things like that. But he won the event, so he got some money, which he was pretty rapt on, and then went back. But outside of that, there's not a lot of information exchange going on between the elected sister cities. So I wonder if that program is something that probably needs to be parked altogether until we get on top of. And I think that's what, you know, dismissing Townsville City Council and bringing in an administrator would bring. Why we don't need to pay for something that we're not getting a benefit for now. We've got to focus on our basic services. That's at the end of the day, we've got to strip it right back.
And I think this is something that every Australian can relate to, as we're in a cost of living crisis as well, that we're all making those kind of cutbacks within our own budgets. Do I need a block of chocolate? No, I don't. It's not good for me. It's going to cause other medical complications, which will be another economic burden. So we resist the block of chocolate this week, we resist the packet of chips. Okay, not going to buy that. I'm going to brew my own beer now because I can't afford bloody $60 a carton. These are the decisions that every Australian, every Townsvillian right now as well, to keep it on that local level, are making those decisions in order to survive on a daily basis. It seems only fair that the council should be thinking in the same lines.
Yeah. And I think that's where there's got to be more contact points with the community. And if we're cutting off the community, we're not answering questions and we're not responding and we're not replying and we're not meeting with people like we should, then some questions have got to be asked, because we're sort of off going to do, as a council, are off doing their own thing, but they're not engaging enough and getting, it's all well and good putting out a 6-week survey, but that's not getting to the root of the problems.
It's certainly disturbing. So let's have a look at some questions. Now's the time to start asking, ladies and gentlemen, if you've got any questions about this. Obviously, you can email us at any time. Whether we can get the answers then is another story. But right now, A. Appleton, Batty, how can Twitch out the petition? Should we get it into Quinn on the project? I'm guessing you're talking about that useless TV show, The Project. I don't see them helping us, to be honest. Thoughts, Troy?
Look, at any exposure is good exposure. Bad media also is good media. As I said, the Bulletin today put the story up. I'm sure they'll write something. As you said, they mentioned my salary and being on CCC, but they also mentioned the fact that I've asked for council to be dismissed. So it's getting the word out and getting engagement. All engagement is good engagement. And this particular petition asks for where you're from. So it gives us a number, and that's what we're interested in. But what I will say is about this petition right now on the change.org, forget about the paper one and the e-petition, the change.org, we're already more than 50%. So in Brisbane City Council e-petition at the moment, there's 26 e-petitions. We've got more votes right now on the first day of 5 weeks than half of the petitions that are in that e-petition site.
There you go. So it's only available on change.org and the paper version at this particular point. Is that correct?
Yes. And the e-petition with the state government, they're still determining it. But the idea of the change.org and the paper one is to take those signatures and take them to Parliament and say, this is what we've got. This is the numbers that support it. As I said, we're already over 50% of the numbers that are currently in the e-petition site.
Wow. So that's great.
In a day.
And some of the featured comments that we've got here. Edward, Townsville City Council has completely lost touch with the people. I've tried to raise serious concerns about illegal parking affecting my business, blocking driveways, no access, and they've brushed it off like it doesn't matter. Meanwhile, rates are a mess, sewerage issues aren't fixed, and they can't manage their finances. This council is failing on every front. It's time for it to be dissolved and for fresh leadership to step in, and there's more. Tony, this council is a joke to us ratepayers. Why should I be paying rates when I don't even have a mayor that was voted by the people representing my interests? Speaking of rates, I personally want an audit of where my money has been spent, just like we were saying. Currently 8 years of paying rates, and yet what I believe that what I'm paying for is not actually being spent on these services, because the services are getting worse. I want independent administrators that are not affiliated with any political party to be placed in. It's amazing how much people seem to be sentimenting the same things we've said here. Then when it comes to time to vote a new council in, I also want candidates that are also not affiliated with any political party. Now, if any current sitting councillors see this comment, I want you to do the moral thing and publicly step down from your role, just as they asked you to do. Show us ratepayers how strong-willed you are. If you don't, then we will see you as weak and corrupt. So there's a lot of people getting stuck in here.
Somebody
there,
just asked Mark, I think it was Zusi, about anything I've spoken about tonight, is that confidential information? No, as I've quoted, the information that I'm providing is information that is readily available, and that has been reported. So obviously it's a very fine line, because if they can find an edge, they'll find it. But at the end of the day, the information that I'm talking to you about, one, is my personal opinion and views, and I'm not disclosing anything that the public don't already know.
Nice. Can someone please download the podcast just in case they take it down? I would like to see it, as I've come in late. Don't worry, Susie. I do that at the end of every podcast. I have everything backed up. Not a problem. And it is available on multiple platforms in case one does go down. So, we've got Facebook, we've got YouTube, we've got X, otherwise known as Twitter, the artist formerly known as Twitter. We've got Rumble, and we've got BitChute as well. And there's a link tree in the description to provide links to all those things as well. We've also got Jake Soy here asks, vets the electronic correspondence of, I'm guessing who vets the electronic correspondence of councillors?
Generally speaking, that goes through the councillor support. So what happens is you send something in that you want, that'll go to the support. The councillor should be told, but often it goes to a department that it might be road, so it'll go to the maintenance department. It'll come back to that councillor support. If they feel that they can answer the question, they send it on, but the councillor gets a copy. My view is the councillor should sign off on it. But it's quite loose in that sense. So the correspondence is generally vetted by the support staff of councillors, and the information is put to the department. So, and then the councillors, if they feel a need to, will get in contact. But generally speaking, it's the support staff that do the heavy lifting.
Zusi asks, who is monitoring these CCTVs and why? I've actually seen a few adverts for for monitoring it, so I could have actually applied for that job. So I would say general members of the public who want a job.
Yeah, look, there are quite a few, because as I said, it's quite, when you're looking at a wall full of TVs and you're jumping and you're checking and you're switching from cameras, it does your head in. You get a headache. I got a headache standing and looking at it for 5 minutes, and these people have to go, I think it's 30 minutes to an hour, and then they've got to step out because and there's 3 people sit there that just look at it all day long, and then the police come in from time to time as well to view. So,
are you aware of anybody actually being prosecuted as a result of any of this footage?
Yeah, look, I am. There is things like there's issues at the swimming pool. Parents maybe have forgotten they've had an accident, so that's been used. There's a domestic dispute, so that is requested. So things like that do come up. Police do request rights to cameras to see people's faces and get that. So that then leads to a prosecution. What that prosecution, well, that comes down to the Queensland government and the magistrate. We all know about that and where that sits at the moment. So, but
that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, Townsville City Council has a lot of cameras that have the information that can be shared with the right departments.
Yeah. So there has been actual benefit then.
Yeah, there has been, yes.
Yeah, cool. There's not something that seems to be widely reported. If anything, it just makes me feel more like I'm living in an Orwellian society more than anything. It's
and look, I again, that's something that should be put to the council and ask. We want to know what it costs and what's the maintenance. And ratepayers are very clever. They know the questions to ask, but they're not getting the answers that they want. So you've got to persist and you've got to ask those questions.
Well, it just makes you wonder if they're not answering the questions, why? What's so dangerous, about being transparent, which is what they're supposed to be doing. I don't get it. Speaking of transparency, coming back to our current state government. Obviously, David Crisafulli was formerly deputy mayor, I believe, here. What was that time period? 2012 to 2016.
Yep.
That time period that you were looking at, 2015 to 2025, would kind of cross into his tenure.
That absolutely overlaps, and what it does do too is it goes across multiple terms. So you're not just looking at one group of councillors. There's multiple different councillors and deputy mayors, but it's to give a very good. You might look at something that is. Sorry, my battery's getting very low. You might look at something that is comes up in 2015, but you have to go further back to that period. Who's the deputy mayor? Who voted on that? Who brought that motion forward? Where did the evidence come from? Who put the recommendation to the council to vote on that? That has to be investigated. Now, that's not saying whether David Crisafulli or Anne-Marie Greenie or anybody is guilty, but that has to be investigated. So the idea of that's 4 terms. So we're going over 3 terms, so to speak, and the current term. So you're going over those, and it gives it a good visibility of what went wrong, what went right, and the investigator has a really good look at what was working and what wasn't, because that's got to go to the administrator then to say, this worked there, that's something we should put back in place. Or this is a problem that needs to be investigated and that individual needs to be investigated. That's what it's all about, is getting it right.
Well, I would like to think that David Crisafulli and the Liberal government might want to dive in and look into this, considering a lot of this seems to be, perhaps centered around the Labor Party people. They seem a lot more interested in council than the Liberal Party seem to. But the question I can't help but wonder, that can't help but ask is he likely to go, oh, we don't want to look that far back because he may have done something that, might not look good for him now?
I'd like to think that as the Premier of the state and a former Mayor of Townsville and family within the region, that he would encourage it and want to, because Townsville is a great opportunity to dismiss, restart, rebuild, put his own fingerprints on rebuilding this. Queensland government investing in Townsville and make us the town that we once were and should be. That's what David's got available to him, is he takes ownership of it and gets it to a point, and then we have a re-election again. Ideally, that would be great. And look, that would disperse any questions people have. But at the same time, what it does do is it gives all the other councils in all the other regions a marker to follow. Townsville can lead the way and say, this is what we did wrong, this is what we learnt, this is how we can do it better. Now all of the other councils should do it as well. The last time it was done in 2018 was Ipswich City Council and Logan, and a lot of those councillors and officials had some problems. Some went to prison, some didn't.
Wow.
But it was completely administration. So, yeah.
Well, I hope that they take this seriously, and as we've seen, the numbers have climbed even while we've been here doing this podcast, which is great to see. So by all means, people, definitely, I'm going to drop this link into the comments again. If you're new to the podcast, because the numbers have been clicking up, StreamYard has lost access to Facebook account apparently. Reconnect your destination. What the hell's going on?
We can still see
something. So it is still running on North Queensland Freedom Network Facebook?
I know I went into StreamYard.
Okay. Oh, it says destination reconnected. Okay, cool. We're good. All right. For some reason, we seem like dropped out for some reason. I'm not sure what's going on there. Hopefully, that if somebody was watching this on the North Queensland Freedom Network Facebook and something went wrong, let me know so I can re-upload that video for people. That's the link to the podcast, or to the petition. If you having trouble, do contact me at North Queensland Freedom Network at Proton Mail. Alternatively, if you are finding yourself in a position where you feel like you want to do that little bit more and you want to reach out, we have Troy Thompson, Troy J71 at gmail.com. You can get a hold of Troy. I did notice you had a phone number on something earlier. Is it okay to put that phone number up too?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not avoiding anybody. I want people to obviously push this forward. So we're engaged, and we have been all the way along. My last post on my page today was what's available. So we've actually run letterbox drops. We're doing out some signs. We've got some posters. I've got one individual, as I said, in the division, I think it is 4 tomorrow, dropping out 500 or 600 leaflets into letterboxes because they want people to be engaged. And that's what it's about. And look, there's people who watch this and watch other things who don't want me in council. Well, again, as you said, here's an opportunity to dismiss Townsville City Council. I'm part of it. So I'm as affected as all the other councillors. But I believe for the right reasons that we really do need a proper restart.
Yeah. Some people might say that you're doing this out of spite and that, you can't do your thing and, you're not returning back to the office until November. And even when you do, it'll no doubt be a shit fight, So some people might say that you're doing this just to, kicking the table over, dummy spit, throwing the toys out of the sandpit, so to speak. What would you say to those kind of people?
Well, look, if I'm and look, my mind is if it doesn't go to administration, that I am looking to go back into office in November. I'm not there for friendships. I'm there to get the job done. That's what I was voted for, and I'll be transparent and I'll challenge decisions. That's what it's about.
Well, looks like we've lost Troy. I think that was his battery, I would say. I guess that's all she wrote, ladies and gentlemen, unless he somehow comes back in. So I'll take this opportunity to say, yes, you can definitely contact me at North Queensland Freedom Network at protonmail.com if you have anything you'd like to bring forward for whatever reason, or there's something here that you want more information on, just drop me a line. In the description, you'll find we have a free 7-day trial of the Gaia Network. And if you continue to follow that link and sign up, that there's a little bonus for me. I promote this. Obviously, there's a kickback for me, but it's something that I use myself. We watch, something on the Gaia Network at least once every day, if not, every second day or something to that effect. Sometimes I get carried away and binge watch something, So it's a lot of really cool stuff there. And it looks like unfortunately we've lost Troy. So thanks for coming on, Troy. If you can hear me in the background in some way, shape, or form, really do appreciate that, taking your time out to have a yarn to us. In the description also, you'll find 10 free Bitcoin on your first deposit. If you the link is in the description, or email me for the link. Look out, Troy's back. How are you, mate?
Good, mate. Look, I will wrap it up, but my phone, my thing's gone dead and my battery's dying. But I apologise to everybody, and I absolutely appreciate the opportunity. Apologise it's taken so long, but there's obviously lots of people want to twist some stories and defame and do their thing. And I'll be honest, I don't spend a lot of time worrying about them. I live my life for me, and I've always been in the community and will continue to be.
That's it. Yeah, and same. I really don't care what they say or do at this point. It's just it provides so much amusement. They entertain me so well to the point that I'm still laughing from the last one. So I look forward to seeing what they'll conjure up this time. But again, we wouldn't get this kind of response unless we were doing the right thing, I believe.
Yeah, agree.
So thanks heaps for coming on, mate. It has been, something I've been hoping we could get back to at some stage, and hopefully we'll have you back on again, and to discuss how this has turned out, or back in office, and you feel you need to get things out in a proper long form as we do here, unedited, untwisted and turned, everything laid out as it is for the general public to see. You're welcome anytime, my friend.
Thank you, and I appreciate it. And as I've said, with this going on and the petition, I will come back in and give some updates of where we're at and how it's moving. And there's a lot of working parts in it, but from locals to parliamentary, to state, local, state, federal, and Senate, there's a lot of people interested in this petition. So yeah, I'll keep an update going.
No worries. Would really appreciate that. Thanks heaps, mate. Well, we'll let you go and I'll wrap this up, and hope to talk to you soon. Best of luck.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Mark.
No worries. See you, mate. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I was saying, something else I'm really excited about is this Stake app that we've got at the moment. No, it's got nothing to do with food. Stake your bids for the stock market. This app allows you access to Wall Street as well as the Australian market. I've been having a great time learning this. I'm like a kid with a new toy, and by God, I can't wait till I've got a few more bucks to actually invest in the things I've been figuring out and learning. I must say, if it's something you're interested in, AI has definitely been very helpful for me sifting through information and trying to figure out what is a good pricing point to buy in at certain things, which ones pay out good dividends. And something that, was interesting talking to, that was presented by actually was Senator Rennick when he was here in Townsville. He was pointing out things like, franking credits and, oh, wow, if you're lucky enough to be getting, investment in the Australian banks and things like that. And just, look, I don't like the banks, but at the end of the day, I found it interesting that you get 100% franking credits when you sign up with 3 out of 4 of the major banks. Well, it was ANZ, if memory serves me correctly, only does 70%. But, it's one of the cheapest stocks to buy at about $28 a stock, whereas the Commonwealth Bank, amazing. I actually picked up a couple, and it was about 140 at the time, and it popped up to 160. I'm like, Struth, boss was strong with me. I made a good choice there. So already those handful of stocks of, $20 a pop each. But they have dividends, so they pay out, and that works well for creating more cash flow in a time where we are in an economic crisis. And I personally, I physically can't keep pushing myself to the limit that I have. I need to find another way to earn a couple of bucks on the side, and it seems like a pretty interesting way of doing it. I think I crunched the numbers, and in order to achieve what you would call financial stability with just the stocks alone, I only need 1.3 million. If anybody's interested in dropping a few bucks in the bank account. No, seriously, I'm just fucking with you, but hey, I wouldn't say no. It obviously to earn a lot of money, you've got to spend a lot of money, but look, everything starts somewhere. So if you want to jump on there, what was really cool about it, I used someone else's link that gave it to me. And, I got $10 straight up, plus a free stock. It was a stock in Nike, which is about $61 or something to that effect. Last I looked in American dollars. So, it's close, $90 or something like that. I think by the time it translated, so nearly $100 worth, $90 to $100 worth of free shit just for transferring some money in. I hadn't even bought anything. You just transfer money into the account and you can sit back and then start looking. Just as long as you got money in the account, you'll be able to get these bonuses within 24 hours. Don't need to compulsively buy anything just because you got it in there. I admit I did, but anyway, it worked out. Anyway, I highly recommend it. I'm having a lot of fun with it, and like I said, I'm going to AI. X's AI actually I found very useful. Just asking questions about what certain things mean, even how to use the app. I found X's AI Grok to be quite helpful on how to use the app even. So yeah, just some suggestions if people are interested. Go jump in on that. I think it's really good. We've also got if you're using the Bitcoin.com scenario. I know we had Jason on last week explaining a little bit about how that works. These codes here you can use to say thanks, $2, $3, whatever you feel like dropping in just to say thanks. We are completely funded by the general public here, so if you appreciate the content, this is think about it like you've seen a show of the street performer's done some juggling acts, put his life at risk by standing 4 or 5 meters in the air on some precarious collection of bits and pieces on a unicycle at the top or something to that effect. Hey, it was a great show. I really enjoyed that. Old mate, passes his hat around. I'm doing the same thing right now. I'm passing the hat around. If you've enjoyed this and appreciate the content a little bit, to of a contribution, goes a long way. It really will help us out. In the description, there are various other little things you can do to help out as well. If you feel, becoming a Patreon is definitely another way. And a big thanks to all my Patreons, Brendan, Vincent, of course. I mean, Vincent's gone above and beyond. Can't pop around with a bottle of vodka. Him and his lovely wife are wonderful. Sit down, have a bit of a yarn and a cup of tea. It was wonderful to have that interaction. And feel free to drop me a line. Anybody out there who's thinking the same thing, it's not they went and bought it. It's like, well, we've got this bottle of vodka, we don't want it. What are we going to do with it? Hey, Batty likes a sips to Vincent and to Mary. Thank you. And, of course, all the anonymous people, there's a lot of people out there who are helping out behind the scenes who don't want to be known, and that's fine. Even if you want to be a whistleblower, perhaps you work for council and you're like, fuck, good job, Troy. I wish I could get out there and say that. You can come here to me and we can hide you just like we hid Blackboard, and it's okay. They'll just blame it and blame it on Troy and think it was Troy. It's okay. We can give you any name we want. Hey, maybe all our mystery guests from here on in will be Blackboard just to fuck with them. I don't know. Maybe you can think of your own ridiculous little name that you think is funny. Anyway. Big thanks to Bitcoin Jason for all the help setting a lot of these things up, and obviously coming on the show and supporting us, of course, to Belinda, Jennifer, Aussie 65, Jake Soy, Curly, Terrence, Ruben, Karina, Carla, Mark Howard, Gaza, Lee D, and Jeannie Z for all being Patreons. You guys absolutely rock. There's probably other people I've forgotten about who have helped out over time. Obviously my lovely family. Tracy, of course, comes in and helps out wherever she can. I know Janine's always been a big help, behind the scenes, helped me in doing things from time to time. And Jeannie and, Peter and so many other great people. I'm sorry if I've forgotten names and whatnot. And, not everybody gets the appreciation they deserve. But look, I'm just one man sitting here in my own little office. It's not a basement like some of the trolls, but look, thanks heaps for everything you guys do, even if it's just clicking the like button and sharing and all that sort of stuff. It all goes a long way. And look, we've got a long fight ahead of us, ladies and gentlemen, on so many fronts. The next 3 years are going to be pretty tough if my crystal ball over here is correct. God knows what Albo is going to do. We can already see that he's jet setting around at the taxpayers' offense. Offense. Yes, it is at a taxpayer's offense, but it's also at our expense. Did anybody see that footage of him sort of stumbling? Wow. There's some more of our good money going to waste there. Street. I'm having a drink because Vincent, dropped it round, and I feel it's respectful to do so. But I'm not about to fall down the bloody steps like Joe Biden or something to that effect, because it's so smashed. Like, wow, what a way to represent the country. I think back to the days of Paul Hogan and Kingswood Country and all those sorts of things, and that's kind of why I'm like, well, let's have a drink on the thing. If I could afford them, I'd probably have a ciggy, but no, not in the house. It's not good for little ones and things like that. Never liked smoking in the house myself, but anyway, those are the wonderful things that we used to be as Australians, and I would love to see that return. I think, it's possibly dead and buried, but, I'll cling to it as, like Linus in his security blanket as best I can. But all that aside, Struth, Albo. I think the only good thing about Albo being around is he's going to provide us with still so much more entertainment. And good old Danger Dan has certainly got plenty of content to work with, and boy, is he getting stuck into it. So thanks heaps for watching, ladies and gentlemen. Drop us a line, North NQ Freedom Network at protonmail.com if you have any questions about anything, or you want to come on and be an awesome freedom person yourself. So many different ways we can, get your message out there if you've got one. I know it's not easy. you know, to get up there and do things. It's amazing how many people over the years have approached me, particularly, you know, in relation to the council, and, you know, they're all there to tell you, oh, you've got to say this, you've got to get this out there. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm happy to get that out there. When would you like to come and sit down in front of a camera, or would you like to jump on a podcast or something like that? And that's the end of the conversation. So look, it's all good and well to come up and say good day to me and tell me these things in the pub, or, you know, wherever you see me in the street or whatever. But what it really requires is your courage to step up and say something. You know, I can't say it for you. You know, otherwise it's just, oh, well, it's Batty again. You know, I had a little bit more of that vodka that Vincent gave him, and you know, now he's making up new stories. These things need to come from the horse's mouth. If you've seen or witnessed something, we need that eyewitness account. You know, I'm pretty creative, you know, but creativity ain't going to solve the problem. You know, only the truth will. The truth will set us free, and that will depend on you and me. And I'm here to help. That's why I built this platform. So, sips, ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you next time.